At around 3:30 a.m., Shauna Taife returned home after a long work shift. The streets were silent, and everything appeared normal as she parked in her garage. She entered her home, likely hoping for some much-needed rest. However, someone was already inside, lurking in the shadows. Soon after, a horrifying event occurred. By sunrise, police had surrounded her home, and the findings of the investigation stunned everyone. Shauna was born on March 13, 1966, in Salt Lake City, Utah, a place known for its snowy mountains and strong Mormon traditions. She was one of 7 siblings and showed her creativity from a young age, often getting lost in books or drawing. School represented more to her than just classes. She had a vibrant personality, became a cheerleader, and had a large group of friends. During her teenage years, her family moved first to Broomall, Pennsylvania, and then to North Virginia. Each of these moves helped her build resilience and fueled her desire to create a life of her own. In 1994, at the age of 28, Shauna took a significant step by leaving her familiar surroundings to move west to Las Vegas, Nevada, a vibrant city known for its constant reinvention. Las Vegas welcomed her with its bright lights and energetic atmosphere. She started her new journey by working in a luxury department store. Later, she switched to the hospitality industry, beginning as bartender at Fiesta Hotel and eventually securing a sought-after role at the renowned Palms Casino Resort. There, surrounded by glamour and a demanding clientele, Shauna flourished. Her co-workers felt like family to her. Her job provided both satisfaction and financial security. Shauna radiated warmth with her light blonde hair, stylish appearance, and graceful presence that captured attention. However, it wasn't just her physical beauty that attracted people, it was her genuine kindness, cheerful laughter, and ability to connect with others on a personal level. Her friends described her as vibrant, positive, and committed, someone who discovered joy in the small moments of life. In 2002, Shauna's life changed once more when she met George Taife. He was tall, athletic, and exuded confidence, someone who made a strong first impression. George had an impressive background. He was a former star football player in high school, prom king, a West Point graduate, and later became a U.S. Army engineer before becoming a firefighter. He had a magnetic personality and a kind heart, known for his willingness to help others, including financially supporting his mother, who took care of his disabled sister. Their connection was immediate and powerful. Friends admired the way they complemented each other, two ambitious, charismatic people who seemed meant to be together. Their love story grew stronger with the birth of their daughter, Madison Taylor Taife. For Shauna, becoming a mother was everything. She cherished every moment with Madison, enjoying hours of karaoke, laughter, and making unforgettable memories. On March 16, 2006, Shauna and George celebrated their love with a wedding by the beach in Hawaii, surrounded by ocean waves and gentle breezes. However, beneath this beautiful moment, challenges were already starting to emerge. 2 years into their marriage, problems began to emerge. The 2008 housing market crash severely impacted George, creating financial stress that affected their relationship. Shauna loved to spend money, while George wanted to save, which led to frequent and heated arguments over issues that were once trivial. George's growing frustration turned into possessiveness, criticism, and emotional distance. His hurtful comments, especially when directed at Shauna in front of Madison, stung deeply. Compounding these issues was George's increasing friendship with Noel Stevens, a homeless man he had brought in to help with yard work. Although George had always been sympathetic to those in need, Shauna felt uneasy about Stevens. His constant presence in their home only intensified the emotional rift between them. As the months went by, the tension between Shauna and George increased, leading to the breakdown of their relationship. After nearly 10 years together, Shauna made the tough decision to leave, taking their daughter Madison with her. She relocated to a quiet suburb near Las Vegas, hoping that the change would bring her clarity. Although she had separated from George, she wasn't ready to give up entirely. Divorce wasn't an option yet, and she still held on to some hope. Maybe with time and counseling, they could reconnect. Shauna and George agreed to try marriage counseling as a last effort to save their relationship. While the counseling sessions prompted some reflection, they couldn't bridge the emotional gap between them. As they continued living apart, the possibility of reconciliation became more difficult to envision. By September 2012, Shauna's hope had diminished, and the future she once imagined felt increasingly out of reach. Then something unexpected happened that shattered any sense of safety Shauna had left. One evening, after returning home from work, she found her house in disarray. Someone had broken in. Her belongings were scattered everywhere, drawers were opened, and several personal items were missing, including her engagement ring, some underwear, a bikini, and a black dress. Strangely, the intruder had left behind the small, folded pair of boxers on the washing machine and had taken vodka from the fridge. This violation deeply affected Shauna. It didn't feel like a random burglary, it felt personal. Although shaken, she tried to move on by focusing on her work and caring for Madison, but the feeling of unease lingered. On the early morning of September 29, 2012, Shauna finished her shift at the casino and clocked out at 3:01 a.m. After walking through the employee exit, she got into her car for the usual 30-minute drive home. By around 3:30 a.m., Shauna arrived home, parked in the garage, and entered through the interior door. As she walked toward the staircase, she was unaware of the attacker waiting in the shadows. Suddenly, she was struck violently on the head with a hammer, causing her to collapse. The assault continued. Despite Shauna pleading for her life, asking why is he doing this repeatedly, her attacker remained silent and continued to strike her. When she finally stopped moving, the assailant fled through the same garage door that Shauna had used, taking the hammer with him. A few hours later, just after 9 a.m., George finished his shift at the fire station. Like he usually did when Shauna worked late, he picked up Madison from his mother's house. Shauna and George shared custody, and Madison was going to stay with her father for a few days. George then drove to Shauna's house to gather some of Madison's belongings. However, as he got closer, he sensed that something was wrong. The garage door was open. Shauna was always very careful and never left the garage door open, especially overnight. This detail filled George with a sense of dread. As he entered the house, his worst fears came true. The inside was a mess, and it was clear there had been a struggle. Then he saw her. Shauna was lying motionless on the floor, and blood was everywhere around her. George called 911, told the dispatcher he had found his wife and she wasn't moving. His voice sounded calm. However, there were times when his words stumbled. When first responders arrived, they were confronted with a gruesome scene. Investigators were shocked by the brutality of the attack. Shauna had sustained severe injuries to her head, so extreme that paramedics initially thought they might be gunshot wounds. However, further forensic examination uncovered the reality: she had been struck repeatedly with a blunt object in a violent assault. Her hands were badly injured and bruised, showing signs of defensive wounds. She had fought back. In her final moments, she displayed incredible bravery. Detectives initially focused on George, following standard procedure in domestic homicide cases, where they questioned those closest to the victim first. However, George had a solid alibi. He had been working for 24 hours straight at the fire station, which was confirmed by his co-workers and supervisors. With that lead ruled out, the investigators shifted their attention elsewhere. Shauna's murder deeply affected her friends and co-workers, many of whom also worked late shifts at the Palms Casino Resort. The brutal nature of the crime and a break-in that had occurred weeks earlier left them feeling vulnerable and scared. They began to question whether someone had been watching them as well and whether the attack was random or targeted. Detectives revisited the earlier break-in at Shauna's home from 3 weeks prior. This incident had unsettled her. Personal items were stolen, including her underwear, bikini, and engagement ring, while a strange pair of men's boxers was found neatly folded on the washing machine. The details of the break-in didn't align with a typical burglary, making the situation feel even more menacing. Neighbors reported hearing loud, rhythmic thuds between 3:30 and 4 a.m. on the morning of Shauna's murder. This timing matched her arrival home, indicating she may have been attacked shortly after entering. Soon after, another clue emerged. Shauna's personal items, such as her cell phone, health card, and makeup, were discovered scattered along a trail about half a mile from her home. This evidence suggested that the killer had escaped on foot in that direction. William Penix, commonly known as Big Will, was a well-known handyman and mentor to recently released inmates in the Las Vegas community. One of these inmates, a man nicknamed Greyhound, confessed to a shocking crime. With an unsettling casualness, Greyhound recounted how he had attacked a woman with a hammer, even smiling as he mentioned the hammer breaking from the impact. Big Will was initially taken aback, but when he saw news coverage of Shauna's murder, the details began to align in his mind. He promptly alerted the authorities, informing them that Greyhound often loitered at a nearby Albertsons, where he scavenged and sold banned substance. Across the street at a Chevron gas station, Greyhound was known for regularly dealing banned substance. Law enforcement quickly located and arrested him there. Greyhound was found with narcotics and revealed his real name, Noel Stevens. This was not the first time his name had come up. Stevens had a criminal history that included petty theft, banned substance offenses, and squatting. Now, he was a suspect in a murder case. During the interrogation, he denied being involved in Shauna's death, but he admitted that he had been living in a tent on a remote hill. The police were concerned he might have hidden evidence there, so they used helicopters to survey the area and searched his campsite. They quickly found crucial evidence. Inside the tent, investigators discovered a pair of pants with blood stains. Forensic testing confirmed their worst fears: it was Shauna's blood. Digital records provided crucial information. Phone data showed a startling revelation: Stevens was in regular contact with George. Their connection was more complex and troubling than anyone realized. George had employed Stevens for various tasks at home, but he had also reportedly taken advantage of Stevens' weaknesses and desperation. With the promise of thousands to Noel, George orchestrated a plan to end his wife's life. From the start, Shauna's sister, Paula Castleton, suspected something was off. Even with George's strong alibi, she felt he wasn't innocent and decided to travel to Las Vegas to assist with the investigation. Believing that something more sinister had occurred behind the scenes, her instincts turned out to be alarmingly correct. When the police who searched Stevens' campsite discovered incriminating evidence, stolen clothing from Shauna's previous burglary and a vodka bottle with his DNA on it. This bottle was the same type used in the burglary weeks before her murder. Additionally, they found a packaging tag for a hammer, which was one of the weapons used in the assault. Surveillance footage later confirmed that George and Stevens were seen together at a hardware store, appearing relaxed and laughing while they bought a hammer, gloves, and a knife. What initially seemed random now clearly indicated premeditation. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Stevens admitted his guilt. He revealed that George had given him $600 in advance and promised to pay him thousands more once the job was completed. For several weeks, they had planned the murder meticulously. Phone records confirmed their confession, revealing 87 calls between the two in September 2012, including 5 calls made the night before the murder. Stevens stated that George had provided keys to Shauna's house, even recommended that they wear black and break in beforehand. On the night of September 29th, Stevens entered the house, concealed himself in a closet, and waited. As Shauna ascended the stairs, he came out from the shadows. Wearing a ski mask, he hit her with a hammer. When the handle broke, he used the metal head to complete the attack. Afterward, he disappeared into the night. Later, Stevens guided investigators to the location where he had buried the murder weapon, which still had Shauna's blood on it. On October 8th, detectives approached George's family to inform them that he was now a primary suspect in a crime. This news shocked his mother and sister, who found it hard to believe that he could commit such an act. As the pressure mounted, George began to crack. Fearing the police were closing in on him, he drove dangerously through Las Vegas and crashed his car into a concrete barrier without any signs of braking. Authorities suspected it was an end-his-life attempt. Fortunately, he survived the crash while wearing his seatbelt, but he was arrested at the hospital. Both George and Noel Stevens were charged with murder. In exchange for a lesser sentence, Stevens pleaded guilty and testified against George, avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced to 42 years in prison. George's trial started in August 2015. Despite his difficult background, history of banned substance use, and ongoing mental health struggles, Stevens became the prosecution's main witness. During his testimony, he described a manipulative friendship with George. He told the court that George often complained about Shauna, expressing anger over her spending and bitterness about their failing marriage. Initially, when George proposed getting rid of Shauna, Stevens found it amusing. However, when the offer reached $5,000, he agreed to it. In truth, Stevens only received $600. During the trial, the defense focused on questioning Stevens' credibility. They highlighted his past, his struggles with addiction to argue he was not trustworthy. They contended that the tools in question were merely bought for home repairs. However, it wasn't solely Stevens' testimony that implicated George. The evidence included surveillance footage, phone records, the presence of Shauna's blood on Stevens' possessions, and a consistent timeline. Together, these elements painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. The prosecution described George as a man fixated on maintaining control, struggling to cope with financial troubles, a failing marriage, and the fear of losing influence over Shauna. While family members testified that he was dedicated and principled, witnesses observed that his previously admired discipline had turned dangerous. The evidence painted a different picture. In 2015, George Taife was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, along with an additional 81 years for related charges. He later appealed his conviction, claiming that a mix of medications, such as Adderall, estrogen blockers, and painkillers prescribed after a workplace injury, impaired his judgment. In a handwritten confession, he stated that the drugs affected his decision-making. He also contended that his defense attorney failed to address his mental health issues and did not seek a psychiatric evaluation. However, his appeal was denied, and the conviction remained. After the tragedy, the most heartbreaking consequence was Madison, Shauna's daughter, who witnessed the aftermath of her mother's murder. She now lives with Shauna's mother, away from the man who tried to ruin their lives. From this unimaginable loss, Shauna's family has created something powerful, Justice for Shauna, a campaign aimed at raising awareness about domestic abuse and manipulation. Shauna's story serves as a cautionary tale about love that turned dangerous, trust that was betrayed, and a justice system that, despite its flaws, eventually uncovered the truth. At the heart of it all is the memory of a vibrant woman who loved deeply and deserved so much more. In the Italian province of Bergamo, the municipality of Cologno al Sirios has around 10,000 residents. Femicides are a significant concern here, with many women being harmed by their former or current partners. In 2019, Zinaida Solinari, a 36-year-old woman originally from a small village in Moldova, was living in Cologno al Sirios. She had resided in Italy for nearly 15 years and had made some progress toward achieving her dreams. Like many young women who leave their home countries in search of a better life, Zinaida aimed to establish herself abroad. She arrived in Italy in 2004 at the age of 21, hoping to find employment and eventually a husband to create a happy life. Right after moving to Bergamo, Zinaida began her new life and work. She was a vibrant and attractive young woman who received a lot of attention from men, but she was not looking for a short-term fling. She wanted to find a husband. A few years later, she met a man named Maurizio Quattrochi, who was 11 years older than her. He appeared trustworthy and kind. She was immediately drawn to him. It's important to mention that Zinaida lived with her daughter, whom she had at the age of 16. At the time of their move, her daughter was 5 years old. Maurizio welcomed her daughter as if she were his own and later adopted her. Zinaida hadn't yet made many friends in Bergamo. From the start, Maurizio treated her and her daughter beautifully, offering a sense of security that won Zinaida over. They began a relationship that quickly became serious. Maurizio was a painter and bricklayer with a troubled past that included several criminal offenses, which he chose not to share with Zinaida, a fact she later discovered. He had been convicted multiple times for buying stolen property and had several instances of driving under the influence. Despite this history, he treated Zinaida and her daughter with great care. In late 2004, they married. The following year they welcomed their first daughter, with a second daughter arriving 4 years later. Maurizio was dedicated to his family, but he had a fiery temperament. Zinaida affectionately called him a hot Italian, believing it to be part of his charm. She worked to smooth over any tensions. For many years, their relationship appeared loving and understanding. However, beneath the surface, there were troubling issues. Zinaida's family soon learned about Mauricio's bad temper. He was impulsive and aggressive. His jealousy began to strain their relationship, particularly after Zinaida took a job as a waitress at a popular restaurant in mid-2019. Maurizio was unhappy with her job because many men frequented the restaurant, and his financial struggles heightened his jealousy. Especially as Zinaida's salary allowed her more independence, made her the family's primary earner. At the restaurant, Zinaida met a woman who was also from Eastern Europe. They discovered they had a lot in common. Her colleagues soon noticed the tension between Zinaida and her husband, Maurizio. During Zinaida's first week at her new job, Maurizio came to the restaurant because she hadn't answered his calls. He raised his voice at her, and her colleague could see that Zinaida flinched at every loud sound, revealing her fear of her husband. After that incident, Zinaida shared with her colleague that Maurizio was jealous, upset because she had become more independent and had slipped out of his control. Despite this, Zinaida was determined to stand her ground, not give in to his demands, so she continued working at the restaurant, hoping that her husband would eventually adjust and stop pressuring her. The situation was worsening, seemed to be getting out of control. Her colleague noticed that after several months of working at the restaurant, Zinaida had lost a significant amount of weight and appeared very anxious, which was quite concerning. Zinaida usually dealt with her problems on her own, seldom talked about her life. However, it was clear that her marriage was failing. After 13 years, Zinaida realized it was time for a change. She understood how dangerous her husband was after a fight that occurred just before the tragedy. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to respond. Around 2 a.m. on October 6, 2019, the city police received a report about a woman who had been injured. When officers arrived at Via Alberto de Giussano, it was too late to help her. She had already died. The woman was 36-year-old Zinaida Solinari. Police quickly interviewed her family and friends. Zinaida was found in the courtyard of her sister Oksana Solinari's house, where she had been living recently. Oksana had moved to Italy after Zinaida, and her life had been more settled since marrying Lucio Carlo Di Dio. Oksana informed the police about the difficulties Zinaida faced in her marriage. She believed the event was a result of Mauricio's ongoing aggressive behavior. Just before the tragedy, Zinaida had made the decision to leave her husband, believing it was her only option after a recent family conflict. In private, Zinaida confided in Oksana that Maurizio had threatened her, saying if she tried to leave, he would kill her and then take his own life. From that point, Zinaida understood that the man she thought was her protector could actually be a serious threat to her safety. She shared her experiences of aggression, physical abuse, and how she had to call the police after her last fight with Maurizio. At that time, Zinaida had 3 children, but her husband was indifferent and consumed by jealousy. He was behaving violently, and it was only when the police arrived that he calmed down. Although Zinaida chose not to file formal charges against him, she spoke to the police out of fear for her safety. She thought that moving out of the house was the best way to protect herself and her children. After leaving, she hoped Maurizio would eventually calm down so they could officially get divorced. However, Zinaida did not recognize that the period when a woman tries to escape the control of an abusive partner is often the most dangerous time, both during the decision to separate and the act of leaving. Zinaida opened up to several friends about her husband's frequent episodes of intense jealousy. She shared that he not only yelled at her but also physically assaulted her. However, when speaking with detectives, she did not mention the threats of violence. She minimized the severity of her situation, claiming that her husband had never physically harmed her until mid-2019, despite his aggressive demeanor and constant emotional pressure. Zenaida believed she could manage her circumstances alone. Just 2 hours before she was murdered, a patrol of carabinieri drove by her sister's house. Oksana was aware that Maurizio was searching for his wife. He had come to visit her that evening and hadn't been seen since. Concerned for safety, Oksana called the police. The carabinieri checked the area but left without finding anything suspicious. Later that evening, Oksana's husband mentioned seeing a car that looked like Mauricio's parked in a dead end, but they could not locate its owner. If the police officers had been more vigilant, they might have noticed something amiss and potentially prevent the crime. Maurizio Quattrochi was 47 years old, had a history of a bad temper. Recently, he lost his job as a bricklayer, a position he had held for several years. This wasn't the first instance of him being fired. He was previously let go from his job as a cook at a pizzeria due to conflicts with management. Although Maurizio had always been aggressive, Zenaida usually managed to calm him down. However, after losing his job, his anger intensified. He struggled with the pressure of not being able to support his family, which only added to his irritation, especially towards Zenaida's accomplishments. On the evening of October 5th, he was waiting for Zenaida to return home while intoxicated. Just days earlier, Zenaida and her children had moved in with her sister, Oksana, seeking refuge without revealing her plans. She felt there were no other options for support and thought that staying with her sister would allow the children to continue going to their previous school. Zenaida also underestimated the likelihood of Maurizio acting on his threats. She wanted to avoid causing additional stress for their children. The next day after Zenaida moved out, Maurizio quickly found her at his relative's house. They had another uncomfortable conversation, but this time Zenaida chose not to involve the police. She wanted to prevent anyone else from getting hurt and still hoped that Maurizio, with whom she had spent 13 years, would act rationally. Sadly, he had started to see her as an object, making rationality unlikely. Tragically, Zenaida was found outside her sister's house with several stab wounds, some of which were life-threatening. The attacker had cut her throat and stabbed her in the chest, leading to severe blood loss. She died before the ambulance could reach her. At that moment, her 3 daughters were asleep just a few meters away from their mother. When the carabinieri arrived, Maurizio was already gone, having fled the scene of the crime. However, Zenaida's sister had important information about him. Oksana, who was close to her sister, knew details about Mauricio's job, his favorite hangouts, and his car. Her husband, Lucio, noted that an old Peugeot 206 was parked in an alley and that car drove away in it right after the attack. Witnesses provided the police with the vehicle's license plate, allowing them to start the search for him immediately. The police first searched Mauricio's house but found no one there. They then checked his previous workplaces but found them empty as well. He had gone on the run, but there were only a few possible escape routes. The carabinieri were pursuing the suspect and were closing in. However, they worried he might abandon his car and hide in the wilderness. The police monitored checkpoints and cameras along the potential escape paths. Maurizio was quickly located, and a large-scale operation was planned to capture him. They set up checkpoints on the road and stopped cars that matched his description. Despite this, Maurizio managed to briefly slip through the barrier. His escape lasted just under 16 hours. Eventually, a man matching his description was seen walking along the road, several hundred kilometers from the murder scene. Surprisingly, he hadn't traveled far from Oksana's house, as if he was unsure of what to do and was aimlessly wandering while trying to come up with a plan. He was stopped and arrested at the city entrance. The alleged criminal was taken to Treviglio station, charged with first-degree murder, and sent to prison in Bergamo. At this point, Maurizio claimed that Zenaida's death was accidental, insisting he never wanted to hurt his beloved wife. However, her sister, Oksana, reminded him of his earlier threats to kill Zenaida. Oksana was aware that Maurizio had long suspected Zenaida of cheating, frequently accusing her of having affairs with other men, even though there was no truth to those claims. She firmly believed that Zinaida had remained faithful in their marriage, but Maurizio was not convinced. The situation may have worsened due to Mauricio's job loss and Zinaida's newfound independence. She recognized that their family was struggling and that they needed money for basic necessities. Taking a job at a restaurant was her way of supporting herself, her husband, and their children. Unbeknownst to her, this decision stirred intense anger in Maurizio. Rather than being encouraging, he grew increasingly jealous and resentful. His behavior could have been exacerbated by the depression often linked to such issues, but this did not lessen his guilt. Mauricio's behavior was similar to stalking. Maurizio bombarded Zinaida with constant work calls, which severely affected her ability to perform her job. He insisted on constant contact, even asked for photos to prove where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Her employer noticed her frequent distractions and advised her to turn off her mobile phone, hoping this would alleviate the situation with her husband. Unfortunately, this only made things worse. Rather than stop his interference, Maurizio started arriving at the restaurant and causing dramatic scenes. Each time, his behavior became more concerning. All these incidents were verified by a friend of Zinaida, whom she met at the restaurant. Although Zinaida preferred not to complain, she shared with her sister that she was overwhelmed by ongoing scandals at home. After long days at work, she would return to face constant accusations of infidelity and jealousy-driven arguments. Trying to defend herself felt pointless. By the end of summer 2019, she experienced physical violence at home for the first time. Instead of addressing their problems and looking for a job, Maurizio turned to drinking, which led to conflicts, left her with bruises. After interviewing the suspect, detectives determined that jealousy was the motive behind this act of femicide. They investigated Mauricio's background to confirm the statements made by Zinaida's relatives and friends. He seemed to be a typical manipulator who was losing control over Zinaida. After losing his last job due to a conflict with his boss, he could only find odd jobs that didn't provide enough income to support the family. This situation led him to alcoholism and increasingly abusive behavior. In contrast, Zinaida was working as a waitress and occasionally as a hotel maid. She also earned extra income through modeling. It became clear that she no longer needed this relationship. From what was known, Maurizio spoke negatively about Zinaida's modeling career, convinced that it was linked to other men, leading him to believe that she was unfaithful. Although he could not find any evidence to support this, he was equally unable to convince his spouse otherwise. After the Carabinieri were first called due to a domestic dispute involving threats, they assessed Mauricio's behavior and advised Zinaida to move out. It was generally accepted that her refusal to file a complaint contributed to her death. Maurizio continued to assert that his attack was unintentional, claiming he simply wanted to talk to his wife and that she was the one who first exhibited aggression. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation contradicted these assertions. Zinaida had remained calm, diffusing all hostility, and consistently tried to avoid conflict. In contrast, everyone who knew Maurizio well described him as extraordinarily aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling. The fact that the Carabinieri could not find him during their patrol confirmed suspicions that he had set up an ambush and was in hiding. He possessed a kitchen knife, which became the weapon used in the murder. It could not have ended up in his hands by chance. He had taken it with him intentionally, having planned to confront Zinaida from the very beginning. According to the reconstruction of events, late on Saturday evening, Zinaida was returning home from a night shift at the restaurant. The last message she received from her loved ones was a warning. Around midnight, Oksana wished her sister a safe journey and advised her to be careful. When speaking to the police, Oksana expressed that she had a bad feeling, which is why she wrote this message to Zinaida. She had no idea that the future killer was already waiting for his victim outside the house. Zinaida barely managed to stop near the gate of Oksana's house and got out of her car. She had walked only 3 meters when Maurizio attacked her with a kitchen knife, striking her several times with force. However, Zinaida did not lose consciousness. Instead, she began to scream. This noise awakened her neighbors and her sister, who called for help. Unfortunately, the criminal had enough time to inflict a fatal wound on his victim. Even after the neighbors raised a ruckus, he continued the attack, unable to control the anger fueled by jealousy. Realizing what had happened, Maurizio jumped into his car and began to flee. However, this reckless escape was ill-conceived, as there was nowhere for him to hide. The day of Zinaida Solinari's funeral was declared a day of mourning in the city. This tragic news shocked not only the numerous members of the city's Moldovan community but also all other residents. Flags were lowered, and many local establishments were closed. A memorial service was held, attended by an Orthodox priest from Bergamo. Hundreds of concerned citizens came to the church for the vigil, all appalled by the tragic fate of this kind and beautiful woman. White flowers lay on the white coffin, and red ribbons, a symbol of the fight against femicide, were tied at the feet of local residents. Red roses were placed around a fountain in the main square, and candles were lit. Meanwhile, the suspect remained defiant. His story changed several times, resulting in no one believing him anymore. During another interrogation, Maurizio claimed that the meeting was simply to communicate with his wife. After consuming a considerable amount of alcohol, he insisted that he felt a surge of jealousy, which had become increasingly frequent. Throughout the day, he had contacted his wife. Even if Maurizio genuinely wanted to know what his wife was doing that evening, the response did not satisfy him. He attacked her while checking her mobile phone. The Carabinieri discovered that earlier that evening, at about 6 p.m., Oksana had informed her that Maurizio had come to her house looking to see his children. Naturally, Zinaida refused, as she immediately noticed that he was drunk. She told him he could only see his daughters the next day when he had sobered up. This likely intensified Mauricio's jealousy, suggesting that he may have been lying in wait near the house for several hours before attacking his victim. Initially, Maurizio insisted that it was all an accident, then claimed he did not remember anything. His final explanation was that he did not want to kill Zinaida but was unable to control himself due to jealousy. His lies did not clarify whether he had truly been waiting there all that time with a knife or if he had left and returned after the Carabinieri had checked the area. Maurizio maintained that he could not recall anything because of the alcohol he had consumed and even denied bringing a knife with him, claiming he could have found it near his sister Zinaida's house. During interrogations, he also stated that his wife loved him, that she did not deserve such an end, that he believed until the very end that they could be together again and everything would work out. Oksana and Lucio countered this claim, stating that it was a lie. Zinaida had fled because she was afraid of him, felt under constant pressure and control. At the hearing, one of the first to speak was her sister, 32-year-old Oksana. She recounted how she heard a muffled cry for help in her sleep. Instinctively, she felt it was Zinaida. Upon opening her eyes, she heard it again and realized she was right. She immediately woke her husband, and together they rushed into the street, where they saw Maurizio. The attack was ongoing. He was holding Zinaida by the throat, striking her repeatedly. The prosecutor's office rightly labeled this act an extreme form of cruelty, as the criminal was completely out of control. Even in front of witnesses, the assault continued. This brutal act left 3 children without a mother and father. Oksana's words were substantiated by her husband, Lucio, his brother, Alessandro, and her neighbor, Riccardo Passini. They all witnessed the moment of the attack but did not have time to intervene. Everything happened too quickly. When they approached, Maurizio fled. Zinaida's 18-year-old daughter, Vitalia, also participated in the trial. Mauricio's 2 youngest daughters, aged 9 and 13, were not present in the courtroom. They did not want to interact with their father, who had left them orphaned. The girls were placed in Oksana's care. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified that he found 18 wounds on Zinaida's body. 3 of these wounds were inflicted on her face and were identified as defensive injuries on the victim's arms. Another 8 wounds were located on her neck, indicating that this was likely the target area of the killer, as his actions did not correspond with typical unintentional murder. One of the most dangerous blows punctured the aorta at the base of her neck, resulting in severe bleeding. Just a few minutes later, Zinaida lost consciousness and subsequently died. Her relatives held her in their arms during her final moments as she faded before their eyes, bleeding to death until the rescue service arrived. Her last words were, "I can't breathe anymore." Only after hearing her last words did he decide to flee. At that moment, a kitchen knife fell to the ground, which was later found by the police. The prosecution insisted that the attack was premeditated, as the knife found matched one from Mauricio's kitchen set, which was missing from his home. The lawyer tried to justify the defendant in an implausible manner, claiming that he had found a blade near his sister Zenaida's house. Despite this, Mauricio's lawyer continued to advocate for a mitigated sentence and insisted on a psychiatric examination. According to the lawyer, there had been a systematic deterioration in Mauricio's mental state, which became apparent several days before the crime. On that day, Zenaida stated that he had become obsessive, possessive, and much more aggressive than usual. Just before the incident, Zenaida told her sister that her husband had tried to strangle her with a belt from a robe. When Oksana's husband came to help with a move, he noticed that Zenaida's internet cables had been cut, which seemed strange. Furthermore, Mauricio took her mobile phone, indicating that the situation was spiraling out of control. The lawyer believed these were signs of mental problems. However, the relatives of Zenaida did not want to allow the killer to receive a lenient sentence due to claims of insanity. Oksana claimed that her sister had considered breaking up 8 years before the tragedy. Oksana said Zenaida felt like a victim and was afraid that her husband could be dangerous, but she stayed in a relationship for the sake of their children. Zenaida's relatives said she described a miserable 10-year marriage. Mauricio ended his own life, as he had promised, while in custody during the trial. His lawyer commented on his client's death. The hearing shocked Mauricio. He could not bear the shame and disgrace, especially since some aspects, according to him, did not correspond to reality. He was particularly taken aback by witness testimonies that described 10 years of torment, during which his wife had suffered and was denied a divorce. Mauricio expressed regret for his actions but realized he could not turn back time to alter the circumstances of his wife's death. He feared that his daughters would be compelled to testify against him, which would have been an even greater blow. Consequently, Mauricio decided to end his life. He left several suicide notes for his family, but their contents remain unknown. The brutal murder of Zenaida Solinari on October 6, 2019, in Colonio Alcerios marked a devastating loss for her family and the community. Fleeing an abusive marriage, Zenaida sought refuge with her sister Oksana days earlier, hoping to protect her 3 daughters. Her courage to reclaim her independence triggered Mauricio Quattroci's jealousy, culminating in a premeditated attack that ended her life. The court's focus on the crime's brutality underscored the gravity of femicide, a persistent issue in Bergamo, where women like Zenaida face danger from intimate partners. Zenaida's story is a stark reminder of the urgent need for stronger protections and awareness to prevent such tragedies, ensuring no woman pays the ultimate price for seeking freedom. Teenage years can be a particularly vulnerable time in a person's life. During this period, individuals transition from childhood to adulthood. They might appear innocent and carefree, but they often hold on to secrets, maybe out of fear or embarrassment. Sometimes, not feeling able to share their struggles with a trusted parent or loved one can lead to serious consequences. The case of Justice Garrett, who was only 16 when her life was tragically cut short in 2018, has shocked Florida. For her mother, it was a heartbreaking realization. She had not recognized or understood the struggles her daughter was facing. Justice Marie Garrett was born on March 23, 2002, and is the eldest daughter of Danielle Pratt and Stanley Garrett. Justice spent most of her childhood and teenage years in New Smyrna Beach, a small town in Volusia County, Florida. In 2016, her parents divorced. Justice lived with their mother. A year later, Danielle started dating Robert Nixon Kern Jr. By the fall of 2017, Danielle moved with her daughters to Sorrento, Florida, a tiny rural town with a population of just over 1,000. They settled into Robert's house. Justice faced significant challenges after moving and struggled to adjust to her new surroundings. She missed her close friends who stayed in New Smyrna Beach, felt the difficulty of transferring schools in the middle of the academic year, and was unhappy with her new home and her mother's partner. Despite her frustrations, Justice remained respectful, tried not to cause any issues. Known for her friendly and humorous personality, she quickly made friends at her new school, especially forming a strong bond with a classmate. The two girls became nearly inseparable, with Justice often staying at her classmate's house, and they even referred to each other as sisters on social media. On Friday, April 13, 2018, Justice overslept and missed her school bus. In her rush to get ready for class, she skipped breakfast. That day, her younger sister, Devon, was ill and stayed home, while their mother was preparing to take Devon to the hospital. Justice chose to take a public bus to school, which was only a few stops away. She packed her backpack, said goodbye to her mother, and left the house. That was the last time anyone saw Justice alive. When Justice didn't return home from school at the expected time, her mother, Danielle, wasn't worried. She thought Justice had gone to her friend's house, which she often did after class. When Justice had missed school on Friday, and her phone had been off for almost 2 days, Danielle felt a surge of panic. After trying several times to reach her daughter without success, she hurried to the local police station to report her missing. The search for Justice began right away. When the officers found out that Justice had only moved to the area 6 months ago, they thought she might have gone back to her old town to visit friends for the weekend. Authorities believe that teenagers sometimes leave home suddenly, either in rebellion or for other reasons, and they thought Justice would likely return soon. However, Danielle firmly believed that her daughter wouldn't have left so far without telling her first. The initial step was to identify Justice's friends and find out if she had a boyfriend, any recent conflicts, or other relevant information that could clarify the circumstances of her disappearance. Justice left home without any money, and all of her personal items were still there. Her phone lost signal shortly after she departed for school. Her social media accounts showed no activity since late Thursday night, and she didn't reply to any calls or messages. None of her friends knew her whereabouts, as she hadn't been in touch with anyone. Justice was not drinking alcohol or using banned substance. She was not in a relationship and had never had serious romantic involvement. Justice surrounded herself with positive influences, had no conflicts with others, and had a clean legal record. Teachers at her school spoke highly of her. Her classmates viewed her as kind, compassionate, and sweet. The police quickly checked all local crime reports, incidents, and traffic accidents throughout the area. They considered the possibility that she might have been involved in an accident and was unable to communicate. However, there were no records of her being involved in any such events. Using data from her phone, investigators were able to track her movements on the morning she disappeared. Around 7:30 a.m., Justice left her home and began walking toward the school. Approximately 15 minutes later, her movements became unusual. She stopped for a moment and then abruptly changed direction. Shortly afterward, her phone was turned off. Justice's disappearance sparked rumors and speculation throughout the small, quiet town, where little ever happened. Any incident quickly became the center of attention, spreading through gossip and often embellished with falsehoods. On April 17th, for days after Justice went missing, a man alerted the police about a disturbing discovery he made in a wooded area outside of town. An experienced runner, he often jogged along a secluded trail that passed through a park and into the forest. That morning, while exploring the woods, he was struck by a strong, foul smell that seemed like decay. At first, he believed it was just the remains of a dead animal and thought about reporting it for removal. However, his curiosity led him to investigate the smell further. He stepped off the trail and walked approximately 15 feet into the underbrush, where he found a shocking sight: a severely decomposed human body, unrecognizable in appearance. Based on the long hair and pieces of clothing, it looked like a young woman. Her pants were pulled down to her ankles, her shirt and bra were pulled up around her neck, and her hoodie was tied tightly around her head. He quickly called the police and waited on the trail to avoid disturbing any potential evidence. When the officers arrived, they carefully examined the area and the remains. It was evident that this was a violent crime scene and the victim was a young woman. Her clothes were torn and her undergarments were missing, suggesting the crime was both abuse and aggressive. There were visible bite marks on her legs, probably from wild animals, but the most severe injuries were inflicted by a corrosive chemical. This substance had damaged her face down to the bone and had also been poured on her chest, lower abdomen, and private areas. It was clear that the perpetrator intended to disfigure the victim and remove any DNA evidence, which was unfortunately successful. From the beginning, investigators believed that the body discovered in the woods was that of Justice, who reported missing a few days earlier. However, due to significant chemical damage and decomposition, DNA testing was necessary for confirmation. Unfortunately, the Garrett family's fears were confirmed. Justice had been found dead. Her remains were located approximately 30 minutes away from her hometown. Evidence indicated that she had endured severe beating prior to her death, as her nose, cheekbone, and several ribs were fractured. Because of the advanced decomposition, the exact cause of death could not be clearly identified, but it was thought to be due to mechanical asphyxiation. The man who found the remains provided important information to the police during his interview. He shared that he often jogged along the same path every other day. 2 days before discovering the body, he had seen a suspicious man coming out of the woods near where Justice's remains were later located. Although the witness could not give a detailed description because he only saw the man briefly from behind and from a distance, he described him as a short, stocky white male dressed in jeans and a black hoodie. The man quickly left when he realized someone else was nearby and vanished behind the trees. At the time, the runner found the encounter strange but didn't think much of it. There was no noticeable smell of decay that day, so he pushed the incident from his mind. However, after he found the remains 2 days later, he remembered the unusual man on the trail and reported it to the authorities. Detectives quickly suspected that the unknown person in the woods could be the criminal behind the crime. They thought he might have returned to the scene to hide evidence. Experts identified the chemical used on the body as chlorine bleach. This, combined with the area's humid climate, sped up decomposition and made the remains unrecognizable. The jogger was eliminated as a suspect after passing a lie detector test and giving a strong alibi for the day Justice went missing. Justice's mother stated that her daughter intended to take a public bus to school that morning. However, security camera footage showed that Justice never arrived at the bus stop. A neighbor reported seeing Justice get into a car belonging to her stepfather, Robert. This information shifted the investigation's focus, prompting detectives to question Justice's parents again to understand why they hadn't been honest. Danielle, Justice's mother, quickly admitted that her partner, Robert, had recently lost his driver's license temporarily. Since Justice was running late that morning, he decided to give her a ride. Danielle had kept this information secret to avoid causing issues for Robert. At the time of the first interview, Justice's body has not been found yet. She thought Justice was still alive and would return home soon. Detectives quickly requested surveillance footage from cameras near the school to verify Robert's account. However, the recordings showed that Robert had neither dropped Justice off at school nor anywhere close by. His car was not seen on any cameras along the route to the school, raising questions about where they had gone. This indicated that Robert was likely the last person to see Justice alive. When questioned again, Robert confessed that he had driven Justice that morning despite having a suspended license. He explained that she had begged him not to take her to school but to the nearby town, where she allegedly had a meeting with a secret boyfriend. Robert claimed he did not know the name of this person and initially refused to take her, but eventually relented to her requests in an effort to improve their strained relationship. Justice had asked him not to tell her mother about this trip, assuring him she would return on her own later that day. She also said that since it was Friday, she planned to spend the night at a friend's house. Robert agreed, not seeing anything unusual or concerning about the situation. This new information brought a potential suspect into the investigation, a secret boyfriend. Investigators needed to find and identify him quickly, as he could either be connected to Justice's disappearance or, at the very least, might be the last person to have seen her alive. Law enforcement started their investigation by examining Justice's contacts and social media activity since her phone was still missing. They confiscated her laptop, which led to even more questions. Justice had several accounts on different social media platforms, where she regularly communicated with friends from both her real life and the online world, but no signs of romantic relationships or a boyfriend were found. One particular account, however, appeared strange and suspicious. Investigators concentrated on this profile to identify its owner and determine if it was linked to Justice's disappearance. A young man named Kevin had been increasingly interested in Justice Garrett over the past few months. He messaged her every day, liked her posts, and complimented her photos. However, Justice appeared uninterested. She seldom replied, often ignored his messages, and showed no intention of keeping in touch. Justice's friends later revealed that she had talked about a persistent admirer who frequently messaged her on social media, but she found him more bothersome than charming. Kevin's profile indicated that he was 2 years older than Justice and lived in the same town. The profile included only a few pictures of an athletic and attractive young man, but none of Justice's friends or family had ever met him in real life. Eventually, it was uncovered that the account was fake, with the photos taken from the internet. Experts promptly accessed the account and traced its creation. The investigation showed that the account didn't belong to a teenager but was linked to an adult man named Robert. Justice's stepfather was brought in for questioning. Detectives wanted to know why he had created a fake account to communicate with his stepdaughter and why he hadn't mentioned it before. Robert seemed taken aback that investigators had discovered his link to the account, but he quickly regained his composure and provided an explanation. He stated that he had created the account to help boost Justice's self-esteem, suggesting that as the new girl in town and at school, she might enjoy getting compliments from a seemingly attractive young man. Justice was new to the area, but she quickly fit into her school and made many friends. Recently, however, her close friends noticed changes in her behavior. The cheerful and carefree teenager became more tense and nervous. Although she didn't share the reasons for this change, she often stayed at her best friend's house. Justice spent so much time there that it felt like she had moved in, yet she never told her best friend what was bothering her. Her best friend observed that Justice's stepfather came by her house several times to pick Justice's up. Each time, Justice appeared anxious, tried to avoid going with him. She would call her mother, pleading to stay a few more nights at her friend's and promising to finish her chores, focus on schoolwork in return. Danielle typically agreed to her requests. Robert and Justice reportedly had a difficult relationship from the beginning, a fact known to her friends. However, Justice never claimed that he was aggressive or acted inappropriately, and no one around her, including her mother, had witnessed anything concerning in Robert's behavior towards his stepdaughter. As doubts about him grew, Robert became as the primary suspect in the investigation into Justice's tragic death. Police took him into custody for more questioning while also investigating his background and lifestyle. Robert, 43 years old, had a troubled past with the law, including convictions for burglary, banned substance possession, and violent incidents. His criminal record made it very difficult for him to find stable employment, so he sometimes worked illegally as a carpenter at a local sawmill, taking on odd jobs to get by. Detectives were now trying to piece together Robert's troubled history, his behavior towards Justice, and the events surrounding a horrific crime. Robert had hidden his past from everyone, including Danielle, who was unaware that she was living with someone who had a criminal background. When investigators uncovered the truth about him, Danielle was shocked and finally spoke out. She revealed that Robert had offered to drive Justice to school that day, even though Justice had expressed his reluctance. When Justice did not come home, Danielle became worried. However, Robert reassured her that Justice was staying overnight at her best friend's house. He even told her not to call the police or contact her friend. Investigators looked into Robert's devices and found that in the months before Justice disappeared, he had repeatedly searched online for information about substances that could make a person unconscious or immobile. He had also explored ways to buy such substances on the dark web and seemed to have successfully made a purchase. Robert didn't stop there. He looked into ways to remove DNA evidence from a body, using common household items like bleach and disinfectants. He even examined satellite images of wooded areas near DeLand, where Justice's body was ultimately discovered. It was apparent that Robert had been carefully planning his crime for months, intending to hide the body and eliminate all evidence. His motive was increasingly clear. He had developed an unhealthy obsession with justice and believed that the only way to fulfill his disturbing desires was through violence. To evade the legal repercussions for his actions, he resolved to kill her. Investigators cleared up their suspicions about Robert's involvement by examining the geolocation data from his phone on that day. He drove away from their home with Justice toward her school, but then suddenly changed direction and stopped in a remote area. At this point, it's believed that Robert may have used a chemical, possibly chloroform, to incapacitate Justice. He then turned off Justice's phone. His vehicle was monitored as it traveled to the location where it remained for about an hour. This time frame would have provided him enough opportunity to assault Justice, physically harm her, strangle her, and hide her body in the woods. From 8:12 a.m. to 9:17 a.m., Robert's phone remained in the area where Justice's body was eventually found. On that day, he carried a small bottle of a chlorine-based substance, which he poured over her face and other areas to eliminate possible evidence. However, Robert became anxious, worrying that he might have left traces behind. 2 days later, he came back to the scene with a large container of bleach, poured it over Justice's head, chest, and lower body in a final effort to destroy any evidence that could connect him to the crime. That morning, the attacker revisited the crime scene and was seen by a jogger. The jogger later found Justice's body and reported it to the police. Kern's alibi quickly unraveled. Although he worked unofficially at a local sawmill, he had asked 2 co-workers to falsely claim he was on time that day, when in fact he was almost 2 hours late. When questioned further, both co-workers admitted the truth after being warned they could face charges for lying and hiding evidence in a violent crime. Robert denied all the charges, but the evidence against him was overwhelming, leading to a trial. Witnesses described Justice as living in fear during the final months of her life, often avoiding her home. Despite her struggles, she never expressed her fears, not even to her mother. Danielle, caught up in her love for her new partner, didn't recognize the danger and never asked Robert about his past. Prosecutors thoroughly disproved Robert's statements, showing he had carefully planned the crime with the intent to kill Justice. Forensic evidence, such as moss and soil samples from the location where Justice's body was found, matched particles found on his car mats, strengthening the connection to the crime scene. However, allegations of abuse assault could not be definitively proven because the DNA evidence and tissue samples had been destroyed by a corrosive chemical that he used, which eroded the victim's remains. In August 2022, almost 2.5 years after the crime, Robert Nixon Kern Jr. was found guilty of premeditated violent murder. He received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole, meaning he will never be released. The tragic murder of 16-year-old Justice Garrett on April 13, 2018, in Sorrento, Florida, exposed the hidden dangers of teenage vulnerability. Justice's silent struggles, unnoticed by her mother, Danielle, underscore the critical need for open communication and vigilance to protect teens from unseen threats, ensuring her loss inspires lasting change. Kitzbühel is a small Austrian town located, with a population of just over 8,000 people. Despite its size, more than 20,000 tourists visit every winter, drawn by the local mountain slopes. For many decades, this place has been known as a winter resort for the wealthy. Additionally, there are numerous celebrations that attract athletes and fans from around the world. Since October 2018, the ski slopes have been prepared before the winter season. The hotels and tourism companies have been making the final preparations to welcome numerous guests. However, the joyful events were overshadowed by the horrific murders. Nadine Hinterholzer was born in Austria, grew up in a close-knit family. From an early age, she was energetic, cheerful, and quite pretty. She had a large circle of friends who loved her for her straightforwardness, good sense of humor, and pleasant demeanor. Nadine lived with her parents and older brother in a spacious house in Kitzbühel. At the age of 14, significant changes began in her life when she met a guy named Andreas E., who was 20 at the time. He already looked like an adult, while she was still a teenager. A 6-year age difference at that age can seem significant. Despite this, they felt a mutual attraction. After several dates, they began a romantic relationship in secret from Nadine's relatives. Eventually, they both realized that age could pose the greatest obstacle in their relationship. Nadine was concerned that her older boyfriend could face legal issues because of his involvement with a minor, but they were reluctant to break up. At first, Nadine carefully hinted to her parents about the significant changes in her life, which raised some alarms for her mother and father. However, Andreas was determined and decided to take a bold step. He personally approached Nadine's family to seek permission for their relationship. From the beginning, he emphasized that this was not a fleeting affair. He wanted to build a future with her but did not want to rush her, allowing her to finish school and pursue her education. Andreas was familiar with her brother, Kevin. Soon after meeting, they became close friends. During home visits, Andreas's initiative was highly appreciated by Nadine's parents, especially after she described him as well-mannered, polite, and loving. Overall, the family liked Andreas, so they permitted Nadine to continue their relationship. Nadine had just entered the challenging teenage years. Her parents believed that a relationship with an older boyfriend could positively influence her, as he could take care of her and protect her from unpleasant situations. Andreas acted as though Nadine meant a lot to him, growing closer to her family. Initially, they spent all their free time together, and after 3 years, Andreas moved in with them. Nadine and Andreas posted statuses on social media indicating their engagement. While Andreas had intentions of getting married, he respected Nadine's desires to finish school and make her own life decisions before rushing into marriage. They continued dating for several years, to the point where Nadine's family began to treat Andreas like their own son. Finally, Nadine turned 18, officially becoming an adult, while Andreas was already 24. They decided it was time to move out and live independently. Nadine's grandmother significantly assisted them by offering her apartment for Nadine and Andreas to settle in. By this time, Nadine had completed her schooling. She intended to continue her studies at college. She did not plan on marriage or children, which disappointed Andreas slightly, as she wanted to establish herself first. Nadine enrolled in driving school and attended classes with her friends, who often picked her up. She aspired to become a professional dancer and build a career in this field. To their relatives, Nadine and Andreas represented the epitome of romance. Although the age difference made their relationship seem unconventional, it was evident that their bond was built on love and mutual understanding. It seemed as though their lives were just beginning, with no threats on the horizon. Andreas had faced Nadine's transitional phase early in their relationship when she was just 14, and they had managed to cope with that difficult period, maintaining, even strengthening their bond. However, after she reached adulthood, some other challenges began to emerge in their relationship. Andreas was seriously determined to pursue further development, family life, and children, but he could not achieve the same aspirations from his beloved. A 24-year-old man, he worked as a bricklayer and spent the lion's share of his time, energy on his job. Upon returning home in the evening, he just wanted to relax with his girlfriend in their apartment, but this did not meet the new needs of an 18-year-old. While she had already become an adult, she still wanted to relax, spend time with friends, and go to parties. Previously, they had constantly gone out together, but now Andreas wanted to spend time at home in front of the TV, which was too boring for Nadine. Initially, she managed to persuade him to go for walks or spend time outside their home, but over time, this became nearly impossible. Andreas began to refuse such outings, citing fatigue and stating that he had to work in the morning. He complained that he wanted to relax and recharge but felt unsupported by her. During this period, the age difference between them became particularly apparent. Nadine was at the peak of her activity and craved entertainment, while she realized that Andreas had already moved past that phase of life, who now had other interests. However, she was not willing to adjust to him or give in. She wanted to live the life of a young woman, socialize, and have fun with her friends. All of this led to conflicts beginning to arise between them. Nadine even told Andreas that if this continued, she would have to break up with him. Despite her repeatedly expressing this not only to him but also to her friends and relatives, he did not take her words seriously. He saw no reason for a breakup, insisting that he still loved her, hoped she would calm down over time and everything would return to normal. He continued planning a lavish wedding, believing it was the right time since their relationship had lasted for 5 years. He wanted to change his social media status from engaged to married, but her insistence on remaining single, along with her constant reproaches and talk of breaking up, loomed over their relationship. Andreas increasingly became intrusive and rude. Nadine felt that he simply wanted to control her completely and grew angry that he could not succeed. She even began to tell her friends that they had always had problems that she had kept silent about. In the summer of 2018, Nadine made the firm decision to break up, but she did not want any conflict. She hoped they could maintain a friendly relationship. At that time, she was 19 years old, and Andreas was already 25. According to Nadine, her boyfriend was never cruel or aggressive and did not limit her communication with others. The major issue was his passivity and jealousy. He could not stand it when she was in the company of other guys. She even lost all her male friends after meeting Andreas at the age of 14. Nadine told her friend that they had decided to separate and live apart. She was sure that her boyfriend took it calmly. She believed their relationship was officially over after 5 years together. Nadine and Andreas stopped dating. He moved out of her grandmother's apartment and returned to his parents' house. The idea of maintaining friendly relations seemed to work as they both had mutual friends and kept in touch with their families. Andreas continued to be friends with Nadine's older brother, Kevin, as if nothing had happened. They were peers and had a lot in common. However, this was the calm before the storm. During this period, doubts began to surface during their communication. Nadine increasingly suspected that Andreas was not taking the breakup calmly. Kevin thought Andreas had accepted this as another whim of his girlfriend and was simply waiting for a signal from Nadine regarding the restoration of their relationship. The friends had discussed this many times. Andreas could not accept that it was truly over. Thoughts and conversations about his ex consumed almost all of his time. Andreas's behavior approached obsession. He seized every opportunity to communicate with Nadine, asking for a second chance, trying to win her back, even continuing to talk about marriage and children. Within the first month of the breakup, it became clear that Andreas did not understand the situation and was simply in denial. He did not realize that they were no longer a couple. Each time Nadine firmly said no, insisting that everything was over between them, she labeled their relationship as her youthful mistake, even confiding this to her other friends. All of this hurt Andreas, but he continued to endure. He still hoped for a reconciliation. Some of his friends sympathized with him, but by the end of the second month after the breakup, they too began to notice that his behavior resembled stalking. He showed up everywhere Nadine went, always initiating conversation. Andreas's persistence caused Nadine to start avoiding him. She tried to gently indicate that their relationship was over, but he only became more determined. When she tried to stop their meetings, he made efforts to interact with her. Nadine's friends and family knew that she was consistently rejecting his advances, but he was spreading different stories to his own circle. Even 2 months after the breakup, he still believed that she wanted to be with him and thought she was only trying to make him pursue her. Kevin tried to tell Andreas to move on and date other girls, but he remained stubborn. As of October 5, 2018, the situation remained unchanged. Nadine and Andreas had officially been separated for 3 months. Nadine's entire family was aware of the breakup. Even his parents tried to convince him to reconsider. That evening, Andreas spent time with Kevin. They visited several bars but didn't stay long in any of them. Eventually, they ended up at one bar, where Kevin unexpectedly saw Nadine. He found it surprising to run into her, especially since, despite the town being small, there were enough bars catering to tourists that it was unlikely they would see each other regularly. Andreas appeared to either be following Nadine, receiving updates on her location, or simply searching for her as he moved between various places throughout the evening. Kevin knew that for the past 3 months, Andreas had been claiming that he and Nadine loved each other and intended to get married once he won her back. While similar situations had occurred before, this time things were different. Nadine was not just with her friend, she was also accompanied by another man. When Andreas noticed this, he instantly became angry, approached Nadine, taking her hand and starting an argument. He attempted to pull her out of the bar, but she resisted. Her 24-year-old friend, Florian Jani, intervened, positioning himself between Andreas and Nadine. He insisted that he was merely a friend and not romantically involved with her, claiming they had only just met. Nonetheless, Andreas was not calmed by this explanation. He was furious that Nadine was spending time with another man and struggled to contain his anger, nearly provoking a fight in the bar. Nadine, Florian, and her brother worked hard to soothe him, prevented Andreas from asserting control over Nadine. After significant effort, they managed to calm him down, though he was still in tears. Feeling overwhelmed, Andreas chose to leave the bar, not wanting to remain in that environment. Kevin stayed behind with Nadine and Florian, worried about their safety. Andreas' outburst was alarming, and now Nadine felt genuinely concerned for her well-being. She didn't want to remain in the bar either, but feared that her ex might be waiting outside. After waiting to ensure Andreas had left, the entire group decided to walk Nadine home. Florian drove her back, even offered to stay the night to help her feel safe. Overwhelmed by fear, Nadine accepted his offer. This choice would prove to have significant consequences. Around 4 a.m., Andreas could no longer contain his jealousy and chose to contact his ex again. When he reached her house, he noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, which he recognized as Florian's. It became clear that Andreas hadn't gone home after leaving the bar. Instead, he had remained in the parking lot, secretly watching the group. He observed that Florian was with Nadine, while no one else had left the house. This only fueled his anger. Andreas suspected that Nadine was lying and dating someone new. He felt they were enjoying themselves together without a care. He resolved to confront both Nadine and Florian about the situation. Furious, Andreas jumped out of his car and started ringing the doorbell while banging on the front door. Instead of Nadine and her friend, her father, 59-year-old Rupert, answered. He came out to calm Andreas, who was shouting. Rupert insisted it was too late for arguments and asked Andreas to leave until morning, when they could discuss everything calmly. Rupert was aware of the situation involving Florian at the bar, reassured Andreas that Nadine and Florian were just friends. Understanding and approachable, Rupert shared a cigarette with Andreas, invited him to talk outside on the street. They had a conversation on various topics, as Rupert probably hoped this would soothe Andreas and persuade him to leave. Having known each other for several years, Andreas had become a valued member of Nadine's family. Nadine's parents treated him well, which is why Rupert chose not to call the police to remove his daughter's ex-boyfriend. After speaking with Rupert, Andreas seemed to feel less agitated. He got into his car and drove off, while Rupert returned inside to go to bed. However, just a short distance down the road, Andreas began to feel annoyed again. He came back 15 minutes later, knocking on the door and ringing the bell, which disturbed everyone in the house. Nadine and Kevin came out to confront him. Unlike Rupert, they were very upset, wanted to make it clear that Andreas needed to leave. A new argument broke out at the front door. No one was holding back their words. Nadine was determined to completely cut off ties with her bothersome ex and insisted that there should be no further relationship between them. She demanded that he vanish from her life for good. Kevin backed his sister, stating that their friendship was overdue to Andreas's stalking behavior. He was worried about Andreas's unhealthy actions and wanted nothing more to do with him. Meanwhile, Andreas felt betrayed, convinced that Nadine had been unfaithful and that Kevin was protecting her. He now felt abandoned by Kevin, who he believed should have supported him instead. Before leaving, Andreas tried to find out if Nadine had cheated. However, she firmly told him it was not his concern since they hadn't been dating for several months. At that moment, Andreas had a shocking realization. Nadine had actually broken up with him 3 months ago, and all his attempts to win her back were in vain. No one expected him to pursue her anymore. Feeling angry, Andreas decided to go home, choosing to avoid confronting his feelings of hurt. At 5:30 a.m. on October 6, 2018, Andreas returned to his ex's house. He began knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, but he did not shout. This time, Rupert responded. He was already very irritated because Andreas had kept the whole family awake the previous night. When Rupert opened the door, he intended to angrily chase Andreas away and threatened to call the police, but he was cut off before he could finish. Andreas pulled out a gun, shot him in the head twice, killing him instantly. He then stepped over Rupert's body and entered the house. Nadine's mother, 51-year-old Andrea, rushed outside when she heard the noise. Tragically, she became the next victim. Andreas then attacked Kevin. He went upstairs and attempted to enter Nadine's room, but Nadine and Florian had locked the door. Andreas determined that the quickest way to reach her was through the balcony. He went outside, climbed the bars on the building's facade, broke the window, opened fire on both Nadine and her friend Florian. This horrific event unfolded within just a few minutes, resulting in the deaths of 5 people. After committing the crime, Andreas drove to the Kitzbühel police station. He arrived around 6 a.m. and placed a gun in front of a police officer at the entrance. He confessed to having just shot 5 people. Additionally, he handed over a knife and a baseball bat, which he had used to break into the Hinterholzer home. He used the bat to shatter a window and gain access to Nadine's room. While the knife was never used, it appears he brought it along for safety. The police discovered 5 bodies at the scene, and the details of their deaths confirmed Andreas's account. Each victim had been attacked at close range with multiple bullets. Florian suffered gunshot wounds to his hands as he tried to defend himself. There was nothing missing from the house. The toxicology report indicated that Andreas was sober, with no alcohol or banned substance in his system. He had no prior legal issues. The entire community of Kitzbühel was in shock over the incident. In this close-knit town, crimes, especially such violent ones, were extremely rare. All the neighbors were familiar with the Nadine family, known for their kindness and helpfulness. They had good relationships with everyone in the area. Both the victim's family and the suspect's family were respected in the community. The community especially mourned the loss of Florian Jani, a talented young hockey player and goalkeeper, who was seen as a promising individual. His compassion for Nadine ultimately led to his tragic death. Friends who knew Nadine well later stated that she had no romantic involvement with Florian. They were simply friends who enjoyed good conversations. However, some speculated that Florian stayed the night to protect her, and suggested that they might have already begun dating. Following the tragedy, a small memorial with photographs of the victims was set up in the local church. Over the course of the month it remained there. More than 1,000 heartfelt notes were left by mourners and caring individuals in memory of the victims. Andreas had been in custody in a special cell designed for inmates needing extra supervision. The police considered him at high risk for end one's own life, so they monitored him closely. He spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and was allowed only 1 hour outside to walk in the yard. When the family of Andreas learned what had happened, they addressed the town's residents, expressed their condolences. They also informed the police that a gun belonging to Andreas's brother was missing. The brother had a permit for the firearm, which he kept at home for self-defense. Unfortunately, Andreas knew how to access it and where the key to the safe was. The gun's serial numbers matched, and Andreas confirmed that he had stolen the gun from the house. At a press conference, Andreas's parents expressed their belief that he should face appropriate consequences for his actions. They mentioned that their son's mental health had declined while he was in prison. Despite widespread public anger, the family attempted to explain Andreas's behavior. His father stated that Andreas had been struggling with depression, particularly following his breakup with Nadine. His mother added that while her son might have had mental health challenges, it is unclear why he and his family never pursued mental health treatment. Andreas faces charges for murdering 5 people with a firearm and for breaking and entering. Andreas's lawyer intends to base their defense on his client's questionable mental state. Andreas claims that after hearing hurtful remarks from Nadine and her brother, who attempted to force him out of the house, he lost touch with reality and was unable to control his actions. He states that the only thought in his mind was his desire to kill the cheater. He described this experience as a state of emotional turmoil. The lawyer hoped this would reduce his client's culpability. However, the prosecution argued that Andreas was merely pretending and insisted that he was aware of his actions, he fit to stand trial. The lawyer disagreed with this assessment. In the end, the court ruled that there were no grounds for reducing Andreas's criminal responsibility. Andreas believed he deserved a fair punishment and did not want to evade responsibility for his crime. From the outset, he intended to confess. He willingly went to the police station and had no plans to take back his confession made the morning after the massacre. His lawyers stressed Andreas's mental state during the case. Assessments revealed that he suffered from a disorder that left him with two choices: either walk away and forget or return to kill. There was no middle ground. Once he understood that he could not regain his relationship with Nadine, he became obsessed with the notion that Nadine should not belong to anyone. As soon as the murder trial started, Andreas confessed to the crime. He believed that confessing would make the legal process easier and reduce trauma for the victims' families, as well as for himself. He shared details about his relationship with Nadine, discussing his jealousy and the reasons behind his actions. He described Nadine as an attractive girl who attracted many admirers, which fueled his jealousy. Andreas held traditional views about women and felt that a good woman should behave differently. He couldn't accept Nadine's decision to break up, insisting that she was his property and that she shouldn't date or spend time with other men, even as just friends. On the night of the incident, he was also affected by Kevin's betrayal. Nadine's parents were annoyed with Andreas, and he was afraid of losing her entire family, with whom he felt closer than to his own. He claimed that after the breakup, his family did not provide the support he desperately needed, leading him to lose 10 kilograms. Ultimately, in a moment of rage, Andreas lost control and killed them all. Andreas showed remorse and offered condolences to the families of his victims, but some believed he was merely trying to get a lighter sentence. Prosecution witnesses testified that Nadine continuously told Andreas that their relationship was over. Despite this, he kept asking for another chance, hoping to get back together, and he stalked her without truly grasping the situation. During the hearing, Andreas came across as insecure. He spoke softly, often mumbling to himself, and cried during emotional moments. At times, he seemed to misunderstand the gravity of what happened, viewing it as an accident. The prosecution contended that there was clear evidence of a brutal, premeditated murder involving 5 victims. They argued that Andreas had ample time to think through his actions as he drove to and from his ex-girlfriend's house. When he returned home, he took 3 items: a gun, a knife, and a baseball bat, indicating that he had meticulously planned his actions. The choice to take a knife suggested he intended to ensure there would be no survivors among Nadine's family and her friend Florian. During the hearing, the prosecution pointed out that Andreas had changed his marital status on social media from engaged to widower. Andreas claimed that this change occurred shortly after Nadine's murder, but some friends and acquaintances suggested that Andreas may have done so intentionally beforehand. Just a few months after their breakup, he started reacting more aggressively to Nadine's rejections. He often expressed a desire for her to be dead and sent messages accusing her of dating someone new, voicing a wish to kill that person. At the time, these statements were not taken seriously. The lawyer argued that these were simply emotional responses to rejection, which Andreas struggled to accept. However, this did not necessarily mean he intended to kill her. Nadine's friends mentioned that she had been feeling fearful of her ex lately and had been trying to avoid him as much as she could. She discovered that Andreas had been engaging in violent acts, such as beheading chickens with a machete and torturing cats. His actions appeared to be quite dangerous. During the trial, the defendant struggled to answer many questions, especially regarding why, in addition to Nadine, her friend Florian, brother Kevin, and her parents were killed. The lawyer argued that this showed Andreas lacked control over his actions and didn't fully grasp what was happening. However, the Austrian justice system made a definitive ruling. the murder of 5 people could not be seen as a mitigating factor. The idea that Andreas E. was insane was dismissed. By the end of the trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean he will be incarcerated for life. In Austria, individuals with life sentences are often released after an average of 21 years. Furthermore, the lawyer vowed to continue advocating for his client's release and planned to file appeals. The silence in the small town of Goshen, surrounded by orchards, was shattered when police officers discovered a lifeless man on the bathroom floor, Daniel Green. On February 6, 2015, at noon, his colleagues became concerned when he didn't arrive for his shift and went to check on him. What they found was shocking. Daniel, just 31 years old, had been shot 4 times, with 1 bullet striking his forehead. Neighbors reported not hearing anything unusual. There were no clues to identify the shooter. There was no weapon, no DNA evidence. It seemed the perpetrator had meticulously covered their tracks. Daniel Green spent his entire life in Goshen. He worked for 11 years in the California Police Department and earned the respect of the town's residents. Passionate about his job, he always wanted to make a positive impact on the community, where everyone knew and trusted each other. Tragically, it was here that his life came to a sudden and harsh end. The police launched their investigation, quickly turning their attention to Daniel's personal life. Since his divorce from 27-year-old Erica Sandoval, he had been living alone. Their relationship was complicated. Even after separating, Erica continued to meddle in Daniel's life, trying to control him despite their official split. On February 6, 2015, Erica showed up at the scene shortly after receiving a message from a friend. She entered the house, crying uncontrollably in front of the officers. She claimed that she hadn't seen Daniel that day and was not involved in the incident. However, her actions raised red flags for the investigators. She arrived too quickly, displayed excessive emotion, and there were many unanswered questions surrounding her involvement. The death of Officer Green impacted the Tulare County Sheriff's Department profoundly. His colleagues began to question whether his tragic end was connected to his work or if it stemmed from personal issues. As the questions multiplied, one thing became clear: these mysteries needed to be resolved quickly. Investigators meticulously examined motives, connections, and personal conflicts, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Matt and Misty, Daniel's twin siblings, were deeply affected by their brother's loss. They grew up in Porterville, a small town in California, where they shared a dream of working in law enforcement. Matt initially joined the police force but later shifted to a career in law. In contrast, Daniel remained dedicated to his role in law enforcement, advancing to the position of officer and taking pride in his chosen path. Their sister consistently supported them and felt proud of her brothers. Daniel Green was known for both his career in the police force and his love for motorcycles. He was a member of a motorcycle club, where he enjoyed the thrill of riding and the feeling of freedom it provided. A close friend of his, James, often joined him on rides through the countryside, cherishing those moments on the road together. Daniel's personal life was quite active. He enjoyed dating and rarely spent time alone. For a while, he would frequently arrive at family events with different girlfriends each month. This pattern continued until late 2009 when he met Erica Sandoval, a 22-year-old nurse. Meeting Erica changed his life completely. He fell deeply in love and decided to take a step towards settling down. At that point, both of his siblings were already married, while he had been single. However, with Erica, it felt different. Daniel was truly captivated by her. A close friend of Erica revealed that Erica was very much in love with Daniel at the start of their relationship. Their connection was strong, and they initially appeared to be the perfect couple. However, Daniel's sister observed that although Erica was generally friendly, she could quickly become upset if things didn't go as she wanted. As time went on, stress accumulated in their relationship, leading to regular conflicts and arguments. Erica grew up in Southern California in a middle-class family. She had a brother, who recalled that Erica, as their parents' only daughter, always felt special. Her parents pampered her, striving to provide her with the best of everything. As a result, Erica never faced hardship or mistreatment. She came to expect that her wishes would be met without hesitation. With the constant support and attention from her parents and brother, she developed a sense of entitlement and believed she deserved special treatment. Daniel Green, 26, and Erica Sandoval, 23, shocked their family and friends by secretly getting married in Las Vegas. They didn't inform anyone beforehand. Daniel's brother and sister were taken aback when they received a late-night message that included a photo of the marriage certificate. A few weeks later, the couple hosted a small celebration for their close friends, where Erica wore a white dress and Daniel donned a black suit. Despite seeming happy, Daniel and Erica's relationship was not perfect. A friend and fellow motorcyclist of Daniel's recalled that even before they got married, they had a serious fight where Erica used a razor to damage the furniture in Daniel's home. His friend considered this a troubling sign that should not have been overlooked. Daniel's brother, Matt, also saw the damage firsthand and was worried, but Daniel dismissed it as just an emotional outburst. Tensions continued within the family. During one argument, Matt and their sister heard Erica shouting at Daniel from another room and saw him break down in tears. Matt described it as one of the most painful moments of his life, feeling devastated to hear his brother cry. Intervening in Daniel and Erica's relationship was challenging. The Green family faced tough times growing up. Daniel's brother and sister recalled how they, along with their mother, suffered from their stepfather's abuse. He had a criminal background, drank heavily, and used banned substance. To shield their younger sister, Matt and Daniel, being older, often took the worst of the abuse. Eventually, their mother obtained a restraining order, and shortly after, their stepfather died. These experiences deeply affected each of them. Daniel's relationship with Erica mirrored the troubling dynamics of his childhood. Family members observed that Erica exerted control over Daniel, isolating him from friends and family while also belittling him verbally. Even though Daniel was a police officer who frequently dealt with victims of domestic abuse, he struggled to acknowledge that he was in a similar situation. He realized he was becoming a victim but felt powerless to change his circumstances due to fear, shame, and a reluctance to admit weakness. Just like women, many men often do not report domestic abuse for these same reasons. The problems in Daniel and Erica's marriage escalated in February 2011 when a neighbor witnessed a heated argument between them. Erica was shouting and provoking Daniel, pushing him to his limits. He tried to maintain his composure, aware that losing control could jeopardize his career. In a moment of desperation, he asked the neighbor to call emergency services to intervene. The police arrested Erica, but despite the seriousness of the situation, Daniel chose not to press charges, resulting in her quick release. This incident marked a turning point for Daniel, leading him to decide that their relationship was over. In January 2012, just a year after their official marriage, they divorced and separated. A few months later, Erica informed her friends that she was pregnant with Daniel's child. The news reached Daniel, and despite their past issues, he decided to give their relationship another chance for the sake of the unborn baby. They got back together, moved in again. Daniel's family hoped that this time would be different, that their conflicts would be resolved. He made an effort to keep the peace at home and looked forward to the baby's arrival. However, the issues persisted. Erica frequently confided in her friend about Daniel's harsh behavior. She described Daniel as cold and indifferent, expressing her unhappiness in the relationship. Her friend recalled Erica saying that Daniel had once grabbed her by the neck and attempted to choke her, which made Erica fear a tragic outcome. Daniel's relatives and friends described Erica as having aggressive behavior. She damaged furniture by slashing mattresses and sofas, which exemplified her lack of control. Their conflicts grew worse each month, yet neither side reached out for assistance. The relationship remained unstable, leading to increased tension. Despite attempts to maintain family unity, Daniel and Erica lived in a state of constant stress. Friends and family observed that their relationship had turned into a harmful cycle where both individuals were suffering, but neither was willing to make changes. They kept their issues hidden, avoided seeking help, resulting in a pattern of mutual blame and pain. On January 5, 2013, Erica gave birth to a son whom they named Aiden. At that moment, their relationship seemed to finally be improving. Daniel was thrilled to become a father and felt that his life had new meaning. For the sake of his family, he decided to sell his motorcycle, understanding that the safety and well-being of his loved ones were more important. This decision was not easy for him, but he did it for Aiden and for the stability of their family. Daniel posted pictures with his son on social media, capturing moments of joy and his happy life. However, just 6 months later, the tension started building again. The constant conflicts, arguments became more frequent. Daniel suggested that Erica move out, and she agreed, but she took Aiden with her, completely cut off contact with her ex-husband. Unable to see his son, Daniel fell into a deep depression. He decided to fight for custody of Aiden, which led to the start of a serious conflict between them. These events took place alongside another significant incident in Daniel's life. Just before Aiden was born, Daniel was on a motorcycle ride with a friend when his brakes suddenly failed. They stopped to check, and Daniel found that some wires had been cut. He immediately suspected Erica might be involved. When he got home, he confronted her, but she denied any wrongdoing and claimed she would never endanger his life. Erica disapproved of his motorcycle riding, seeing it as dangerous. Their arguments increased after the brake incident, creating more tension in their relationship. Daniel chose not to involve the police and kept the incident to himself to avoid drawing escalating conflicts. He recognized that their situation was becoming unhealthy, but he decided to stay silent in hopes of managing the fallout. After selling the motorcycle and welcoming the birth of his son, Daniel hoped for a calmer period in their family life. However, conflicts and tensions persisted. In the fall of 2014, during another night spent together, Daniel experienced a frightening incident that shook him deeply. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up to find Erica standing over him with a gun. She pointed it at him, claimed she had a nightmare in which he had been unfaithful. Erica expressed her desire to end his life to escape the pain of betrayal. Daniel calmed her down by reassuring her that it was just a dream and that he had always been faithful. After she lowered the gun, Daniel realized how dangerous their relationship had become. He shared the incident with his friends and concluded that it was time to end the toxic relationship for good. In January 2015, despite previous conflicts, Daniel and Erica came together to celebrate their son Aiden's second birthday with close family. During the gathering, they appeared to be friendly, leading some to speculate that they might be rekindling their relationship. However, Daniel was aware that a future with Erica was not feasible and wanted to avoid their past disagreements. Following the celebration, Daniel informed his friends about his new girlfriend, a 20-year-old named Brenda Vela, and shared a photo of them on social media, revealing his happiness. Many people were optimistic that he was starting a more peaceful chapter in his life. Erica and Daniel's relationship had been marred by conflict, mutual blame. Their text messages were filled with hostility, including hundreds containing anger and insults. Daniel accused Erica of trying to take his son away from him, while Erica accused him of being selfish and unfit father. Their arguments covered topics from parenting to personal attacks. There was no constructive communication, only increasing tension. On the morning of February 6, 2015, Daniel dropped Aiden off at Erica's house as planned and then went to the gym. After working out, he returned home, where a tragic event occurred. Daniel entered the bathroom, sat down, and was shot 4 times in the arm, chest, neck, and forehead. He died instantly, with no chance to protect himself. The day after Daniel's death, Erica was brought in for questioning. She insisted she hadn't visited his house in weeks and had no connection to what had happened. Investigators, however, told her they had surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera showing her entering the house on the day of the incident. Although the video did not clearly identify her, the investigators used this information to pressure her. The tactic worked. Overwhelmed, Erica confessed and even revealed where she had disposed of the firearm involved in the crime. The prosecutor claimed that jealousy and a fear of being replaced by another woman motivated the crime. When Erica was arrested, police discovered a note in her purse with Brenda's name and birth year, suggesting Erica had been monitoring Daniel's new girlfriend. The evidence against her was strong, but the trial didn't begin until October 1, 2019, 5 years after the incident. Erica made about 170 phone calls to Daniel in an effort to reconnect after she found out that he had introduced their son, Aiden, to Brenda and that they were spending time together. This prompted Erica to lose control. The prosecutor also mentioned that after the crime, Erica deleted several messages from Daniel's phone where she had tried to persuade him to believe she would change and improve. However, Daniel made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. He intended to move forward with his life. During the trial, Erica's lawyer argued that Daniel had been an abusive husband who repeatedly attacked her. They presented audio recordings of their intense arguments, where Daniel could be heard insulting and threatening Erica. These recordings were vital to her defense, highlighting the aggression and cruelty in their relationship. In court, Erica detailed the abuse she suffered over the years. She stated that Daniel physically assaulted her, choked her, and made threats against her. Erica explained that she lived in constant fear and refrained from reporting the abuse to the police because she felt it would be pointless. She believed that, as a police officer, Daniel could sway any investigation and that he was too powerful for her to seek justice. Erica also thought that people would not believe her because Daniel was well respected in their community. On February 5, 2015, the day before the incident, Erica said she had a phone conversation with Daniel. During their conversation, they flirted, which gave her hope of rebuilding their relationship. The following day, she decided to visit his house to see if they could reconnect. Upon entering, she noticed 2 firearms on the table, which made her feel uneasy. Curious, Erica explored the house further and discovered a partially open safe in one of the rooms. Inside the safe, she found 2 intimate photos of individuals who she believed looked underage. This discovery shocked her and made her worried that Daniel could be a danger to their son. Erica said that seeing the photos changed how she viewed Daniel. She recalled how he had made her wear school uniforms and started to realize that his interests might be more sinister than she had assumed. After putting the documents away, Erica heard a car pull up. It was Daniel. In a panic, she grabbed 2 loaded guns and hid in one of the rooms, unsure of what to do next. When Daniel entered the house, he moved through the rooms. Erica heard him go to the bathroom, and with the guns in her hands, she followed him, filled with fear. When she entered the bathroom, she found Daniel sitting on the toilet. He saw her and shouted angrily, threatening her. At that moment, she claimed she started shooting. She couldn't remember how many shots she fired but kept shooting until she felt safe. Then she ran out of the house, disposed of the guns, and attempted to escape. Erica revealed that she continued to have an intimate relationship with Daniel despite his mistreatment because she was afraid of how he would react if she refused him. She believed that not meeting his needs would lead to his aggression. This fear was a significant reason for her staying with him. She felt that her safety depended on obeying his demands. During the trial, Erica spoke for the first time about finding photos in Daniel's safe. She explained that she had kept this information to herself during the investigation because she did not trust the authorities and thought they would side with her ex-husband. Daniel's family was shocked by her allegations and completely rejected them. Erica maintained that she was scared her concerns would be overlooked or misunderstood. However, her claims were not backed up by evidence. Officers who searched Daniel's home found no illegal photos or proof to support her accusations. The prosecutor argued that Erica's statements were false, intended to evade accountability. Erica's lawyer attempted to paint Daniel negatively by highlighting that his phone and computer had hundreds of explicit photos and videos featuring adults. Additionally, the lawyer mentioned that Daniel had deleted over 1,000 images from his phone years ago, suggesting that this could imply he had troubling secrets. Erica may have had valid reasons to be afraid of him. She expressed sorrow for her actions and apologized to Daniel's family, stating that she never intended for things to end so tragically, that her actions were motivated by panic and fear for her son. Erica's attorney argued that the responsibility for Daniel's death was not only on Erica but also on Daniel himself. They were caught in a traumatic relationship that neither could escape, leading to a tragic outcome. The jury deliberated for nearly 4 days but couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a mistrial. Erica's attorney viewed this as a positive outcome, as it allowed them to reevaluate the case and plan a new defense strategy. Nevertheless, Erica lost her parental rights, Daniel's brother, Matt Green, and his wife adopted Aiden. Erica Sandoval's first trial in 2019 ended with a hung jury. The next trial begins on February 6, 2025, exactly 10 years to the day after the crime was committed. Jury deliberations began on Tuesday, May 6, 2025. On May 8, 2025, Erica was found guilty of first-degree murder with the special allegation that she personally and intentionally discharged a firearm, causing serious bodily injury to Daniel. Sandoval's sentencing is scheduled for June 5, 2025. The trial is taking place in Room 20 at the Southern County Judicial Center in Porterville, where Sandoval faces 50 years to life in prison. Specifically as follows: she could be sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder charge and an additional 25 years to life for the weapons charge. Sandoval has served 10 years and may be eligible for an elder parole hearing when she has served 20 consecutive years and reached the age of 50. This tragedy has highlighted the destructive potential of jealousy and personal struggles when individuals don't seek help or end toxic relationships in a timely manner. Many lives have been shattered, causing immense pain and leaving many things unsaid. Nevertheless, there are still people who are fighting for a better future, striving for Aiden's happiness. While the story may have reached its conclusion, its impact will linger, reminding us of the hidden struggles that can exist behind the facades of seemingly perfect homes. Ashley Bocanegra was born in the Bronx, one of New York City's 5 boroughs. She was raised by her mother along with her older sister. There is no public information about her father, and it remains unclear whether he was involved in Ashley's life. The family lived modestly but maintained a stable lifestyle. Ashley was outgoing and energetic. She took pride in her appearance and had a strong interest in makeup. From a young age, she enjoyed experimenting with different styles, which made her stand out among her peers. After high school, she did not pursue a specific career path right away. Instead, she worked in retail while trying to figure out her future, but she did not have any firm plans. Around this time, she met a young man with whom she soon developed a serious relationship. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually, Ashley found out she was expecting. The pregnancy was unplanned, but they both decided to embrace this new chapter in their lives and moved in together. In 2014, Ashley gave birth to a son whose name has not been publicly disclosed out of respect for his privacy. The arrival of their son marked a significant shift. Ashley became fully focused on being a mother. Despite being young, her partner stepped up and participated in raising their child. Life in New York City was becoming increasingly challenging, with rising rent and piling daily expenses. By early 2015, they decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, a city with more affordable housing and a slower pace of life that was not too far from extended family. This move represented a fresh start for them. They secured an apartment in a residential complex that had security cameras and on-site staff. Visually, the neighborhood appeared safe, and they hoped it would be a place to rebuild their daily lives. Although their romantic relationship eventually came to an end, they continued to live under the same roof for the sake of their son. They agreed to keep their personal lives separate until their son was older. Ashley took on most of the household responsibilities and began looking for a stable job. Eventually, she landed a position at a home improvement store, working the night shift. This arrangement allowed her to be at home during the day. It was a tough schedule, but it helped her improve her financial situation. Ashley was working toward creating stability and gradually gaining independence from her former partner, all while maintaining peaceful family dynamics. As Ashley adjusted to the demanding rhythm of overnight work, she became familiar with the store's routine. Most of her shifts took place on weeknights, and she was consistently scheduled with the same group of co-workers. This consistency helped form close-knit working relationships. It was in this environment that she first took notice of Daniel Gonzalez. He also worked at the same home improvement store and was usually scheduled on the same nights. Their conversations began with routine work-related questions. Daniel was proactive. He did not shy away from hard tasks and often volunteered for demanding assignments. He came across as calm, polite, and friendly. Although he wasn't pushy, he was often nearby when Ashley needed an extra hand. Over time, they developed a steady rapport. What started as brief exchanges during breaks slowly evolved into real conversations, and Ashley felt at ease around him. There was no pressure or signs of him pushing boundaries. Daniel earned her trust. He avoided discussing personal matters and never made suggestive remarks, but it was clear he was interested. He asked about her day, showed concern for her well-being, and offered to help even when she had not asked for it. This set him apart from the rest of the crew. With each shift, their connection grew. Eventually, they exchanged numbers and began texting outside of work. Their messages quickly turned into a regular flow of jokes, short chats about everyday life, and occasionally planning to meet before work. Their bond transcended that of mere co-workers, yet there was nothing overtly romantic about it. Everything felt natural. No one was rushing into anything, and neither made any direct moves. At that time, Ashley was unaware of Daniel's personal life. Neither he nor their co-workers mentioned that he was living with a woman and their children. Daniel never discussed who shared his home. There were no indications that he was in a relationship. In normal conversations, he seemed calm and composed, displaying no signs of stress or complicated domestic issues. They eventually realized they were neighbors living in the same apartment complex. They discovered this by chance during a conversation about their neighborhood. This made it easy for them to see each other not only at work but also during the day. Sometimes, Daniel would help Ashley carry her groceries, or they would bump into each other in the parking lot, where he would walk her to her building. To Ashley, this felt like a comfortable friendship with a reliable coworker. His proximity and willingness to help were nice perks, making him seem thoughtful. She was unaware of his actual circumstances. At the time of these events, Daniel Gonzalez was a 27-year-old living in Atlanta, Georgia. He was in a long-term relationship with Antonetta Stevens, a woman of the same age, although they were not legally married. They had been together for over a decade, having known each other since childhood, as their families were longtime friends. Throughout their relationship, they became parents to 2 sons, aged 9 and 6. However, their home life was more complicated than it appeared. Daniel and Antonetta's relationship had become increasingly strained over the years, with arguments happening more often. While most disagreements arose from everyday issues, they frequently escalated into larger conflicts. People close to them described Antonetta as having a quick temper. She could quickly shift from calm to confrontational over minor annoyances. This tendency was noticeable not only to Daniel but also to others in their circle. Daniel seldom discussed his home life with his colleagues. Only a few close friends were aware of his personal struggles, which he kept private. However, the ongoing stress at home began to take a toll on him. His relationship with Antonetta shifted from one of love to a focus on logistics, with conversations revolving around parenting, bills, and household chores. Although they still appeared as a couple to outsiders, their emotional connection was diminishing. During this time, Daniel's younger sister, Janine Gonzalez, who was 17 and had recently dropped out of school, moved in with them. She lacked a clear direction, needed a new environment to get back on track. Janine quickly bonded with Antonetta due to their shared history, having known each other since childhood and considering each other more like sisters than in-laws. In contrast, Daniel did not have a strong relationship with Janine. The presence of a third adult in the household did not reduce the tension. In fact, it increased it. Janine frequently witnessed the arguments between Daniel and Antonetta. Eventually, she began to take sides, clearly supporting Antonetta. Those familiar with the family noted that Janine openly expressed her belief that Daniel was responsible for the ongoing conflicts. This alliance between Janine and Antonetta only widened the emotional gap in the household, leaving Daniel feeling isolated. By the time Daniel started spending more time with Ashley, he was already feeling disconnected. His partner was irritable, their sons required constant attention, and his sister emotionally sided with Antonetta. The home atmosphere felt strained and unwelcoming. Daniel began spending more time outside of his home, taking extra shifts at work and staying later as a way to avoid conflicts in his life. Although these choices would later impact his decisions, he didn't express any strong desire to change his situation at that time. After a few weeks of talking at work and texting outside of their shifts, Ashley and Daniel started to meet up more often outside of work. Their conversations shifted from casual workplace topics to more personal subjects. They discussed feelings of tiredness, daily routines, and the challenges of parenting. Ashley shared her experiences raising her son, her complicated relationship with her partner, and her hopes of moving out to live independently. Daniel listened closely. He didn't interrupt her, kept the conversation flowing, and engaged with their shared difficulties. He never mentioned that he lived with a partner and 2 sons, nor did he talk about his sister. As Ashley and Daniel's relationship grew stronger, they began spending more time together. Sometimes, they would meet briefly before her shifts, while other times, they would talk outside her building. Over time, Daniel started to stay a bit longer. He would visit in the evenings, help her prepare dinner, and hang out while her son watched TV. This development felt gradual and natural, not sudden. Ashley didn't ask many questions, and Daniel didn't give her any reasons to doubt him. At that point, neither her son nor their coworkers intervened. Ashley enjoyed her independence. Everything appeared harmless from an outside perspective. Back at Daniel's apartment, things were starting to change. Antonetta and Janine began to pay closer attention to his schedule. Daniel was spending more time away from home, which did not escape their notice. Janine, who was usually at home, started to see a pattern. Daniel would leave without telling anyone where he was going and would often return later than expected. Though she didn't know his exact whereabouts, she began to keep track of his comings and goings. Eventually, she shared her concerns with Antonetta, and their suspicions grew. While Antonetta didn't confront Daniel immediately, his behavior made her feel uncomfortable. One day, Janine noticed something that confirmed her suspicions. Daniel was often seen with the same woman in the apartment complex parking lot. Although she didn't know Ashley's name yet, her appearance stuck in Janine's mind. Janine observed their conversations and noticed there were no inappropriate gestures, touching, or flirting, nothing that clearly crossed any boundaries. However, this situation raised her concerns. She didn't jump to conclusions, but from that moment, she started paying more attention. While Ashley viewed these meetings as casual and innocent, the atmosphere in Daniel's apartment became increasingly tense. Antonetta moved beyond just asking questions. She began checking his phone and closely monitoring his behavior. Although she had no solid evidence, the signs were accumulating. As a result, the trust between them began to erode. Ashley remained oblivious to any underlying issues. Daniel frequently visited, offering assistance and chatting about everyday matters, which seemed to strengthen their relationship. However, underneath these casual conversations, subtle changes were occurring. In the summer of 2022, Daniel, Antonetta, their sons, and Janine traveled to Florida for Antonetta's mother's wedding. They planned to spend a week with extended family, blending celebrations with a short vacation. The road trip was long, and they stayed at a relative's house. Despite the happy occasion, tension between Daniel and Antonetta was evident from the start. They argued during the drive over minor issues related to planning, coordination, and exhaustion. Upon arrival, the situation did not improve. Conflicts arose almost every day, and Antonetta's relatives noticed the strain in their relationship. By midweek, disagreements escalated over trivial matters. The tone of their exchanges turned increasingly sharp and irritable. Daniel often ended conversations abruptly, emotionally withdrew, and spent more time absorbed in his phone or stepping outside for solitude. Antonetta observed these changes and tried to remain calm, but her patience was wearing thin. After the wedding ceremony, while most guests were relaxing, a pivotal moment took place. Daniel, feeling tired and having had a few drinks, was outside in the yard talking to Janine. During their conversation, He expressed that he was exhausted from his relationship with Antonetta and didn't see a future with her. He also revealed that there was someone else in his life, without disclosing the name, but indicated it was a co-worker. Janine listened attentively, keeping her response neutral, though she was clearly processing the information. This conversation became a turning point. Feeling more loyal to Antonetta than to her own brother, Janine decided to share what she had learned. She informed Antonetta that Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else. To her surprise, Antonetta remained calm. Rather than confronting him right away, she chose to be strategic. Her priority was to identify the other woman. They agreed to keep their suspicions quiet and to closely monitor Daniel's behavior. Janine fully supported this plan, and they made a pact: no actions would be taken until they returned to Atlanta. Antonetta kept a calm, cheerful demeanor around her family for the rest of the trip. Though everything appeared peaceful on the surface, she was quietly strategizing to find out who the woman was. After returning from Florida, the mood in Daniel's apartment shifted. Antonetta and Janine didn't mention the wedding conversation, but they began to execute a plan they had developed in secrecy. Their goal was to find out if Daniel was really involved with a coworker. Instead of asking him directly, they decided to observe his habits and behavior. Since neither Antonetta nor Janine had full-time jobs at that moment, they spent most of their days at home, which allowed them to watch Daniel closely. Janine took note of when he left the apartment, who he interacted with, and how he acted when he returned. They also started checking Daniel's phone whenever it was left unattended or unlocked to look for notifications or messages. A few days after returning, Janine reported seeing Daniel leaving work with a young woman. They were outside, smoking and chatting. Janine noted that while their interaction didn't seem overtly romantic, there was a comfortable rapport between them. She remembered the woman's appearance, and when she described her, Antonetta suspected it might be their neighbor, Ashley. Antonetta recalled seeing Ashley in the complex courtyard occasionally, usually with her son. That evening, they decided to watch for Ashley to see if she would appear again. Over the next few days, Antonetta and Janine took turns watching the apartment entrance and the area surrounding the store to confirm whether it was indeed Ashley with Daniel. Their surveillance eventually paid off. They saw Daniel and Ashley talking and then going their separate ways. With this confirmation, they moved forward and took action. Antonetta proposed using Daniel's phone while he slept to message Ashley and lure her into a meeting, setting up a direct confrontation. Janine agreed with the plan. They now had a clear objective. It was no longer just about revealing the truth, it had turned personal. They wanted revenge. The next morning, after finishing a night shift, Daniel came home and went to sleep as usual, briefly chatting with Antonetta before heading to the bedroom. Once he was asleep, she quietly entered the room, took his phone, and brought it to Janine. Together, they started scrolling through his messages. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. In his chat with Ashley, they found personal messages filled with emotional significance, mentions of past meetings, and small details that confirmed the two were in constant contact. That was all the confirmation they needed to move on to the next step. Antonetta used Daniel's phone to send a text to Ashley. She explained that Daniel had an argument at home, was kicked out, and wanted to meet. Ashley responded quickly, asking for his location and how to find him. Their conversation seemed typical for two people who know each other well, so Ashley was unaware that she was not actually communicating with Daniel. Antonetta kept the tone light and casual to prevent any suspicion. After exchanging a few more messages, Antonetta proposed they meet in the courtyard of their apartment complex, a small grassy area between the buildings, and Ashley agreed. After arranging the meetup, Antonetta and Janine started getting ready. They brought Janine's phone to record what would happen. They were unarmed and planned to lure Ashley outside to confront her unexpectedly and escalate things physically. Their intention was not just to have a conversation but to make a statement. They carefully chose the location. It was close enough to nearby buildings for visibility but out of sight from the main entrances. While there were surveillance cameras in common areas, they didn't cover this specific spot, offering a sense of privacy within the complex. At that time, Daniel was asleep, completely unaware that his phone was being used. Early in the morning, Antonetta and Janine left the apartment, leaving Daniel and the boys behind. They positioned themselves behind some bushes near a pedestrian path. The area was shaded and slightly away from the building entrances, but still on public property. Visibility was limited, although someone walking by might notice them. They waited. When Ashley texted to say she was on her way, Antonetta made sure the phone was recording and instructed Janine to continue filming no matter what. Minutes later, Ashley walked down the path, completely unaware of the danger that awaited her. As she neared her destination, she scanned the area, hoping to see Daniel. Suddenly, Antonetta and Janine emerged from their hiding place. Antonetta approached Ashley and loudly claimed that Ashley stopped texting Daniel. Before Ashley could reply, Antonetta attacked her. Ashley did not fight back. Instead, she tried to defend herself by covering her face with her hands and begging Antonetta to stop. Despite her pleas, Antonetta continued to hit her. Eventually, Antonetta knocked Ashley to the ground and continued to assault her with her fists and feet. At one point, she grabbed Ashley's hair and slammed her head against the pavement. Janine chose not to intervene and instead stayed on the sidelines, recording the events. Occasionally, she provided commentary, encouraging Antonetta to be more aggressive. At one point, she moved closer to capture a shot of Ashley's face, who was crying and pleading for them to stop. Despite Ashley's distress, the aggression continued. Antonetta yelled accusations, made threats, and claimed she was acting for Daniel. At one moment, she looked directly into the camera and told Janine to keep filming. Some cars drove by, but no one intervened. One vehicle stopped for a moment but then quickly left the scene. The conflict escalated when Antonetta invited Janine to participate. Janine accepted, approached, and delivered a few kicks. Afterward, both of them took Ashley's phone and walked away, with the recording still running until they left the area. Following the attack, Ashley lay on the pavement. Although she was seriously injured, she was conscious. After some time on the ground, she gradually stood up. She was unsteady. Despite the pain, she started walking toward her building. Later, surveillance footage from the apartment complex showed Ashley entering. Her steps were shaky, and her movements were slow. She was holding her side and chest, and her face had visible scrapes. Her breathing seemed labored. As soon as she reached her floor, Ashley stepped out onto the balcony and leaned against the railing to catch her breath. At that moment, her partner was coming home from his morning run. Upon entering the apartment, he quickly noticed that Ashley looked unwell. She was pale, had swollen lips, and visible cuts on her face. Her breathing was heavy, and she moved slowly. Her clothes were dirty, had some blood on them. Concerned, he asked her what had happened. Ashley responded vaguely, saying she had been attacked by two unfamiliar women but did not provide any names or reasons for the attack. She might have been too frightened or still in shock to explain further. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, her partner helped her sit down and got her some water, but her condition worsened. She struggled to breathe, experienced sharp pain in her side and head. Any movement caused her intense discomfort. A few minutes later, he took her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors assessed Ashley's condition and quickly decided to transfer her to intensive care due to its critical nature. Medical staff observed multiple bruises, broken ribs, and potential internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a head injury. Meanwhile, her partner stayed at the hospital, anxiously awaiting news. Ashley was put on life support and sedated, but her condition worsened. Several hours after the assault, local law enforcement arrived at the apartment complex in response to reports of a possible fight from witnesses. When the officers reached the apartment shared by Antonetta, Daniel, their sons, and Janine, Daniel was not at home. Antonetta answered the door and spoke to the officers in a calm and composed manner. She explained that an uninvited woman had arrived at their door, started an argument, and became physically aggressive. Antonetta stated that she did not know the woman and that it was the woman who initiated the confrontation. She characterized the incident as a mutual fight, mentioning that both had exchanged blows. Antonetta also noted that the woman had been previously harassing her partner at work and had come to their home to continue the harassment. She made it clear that she had not left the apartment before the incident to support her version of events. At this point, the officers had not received a formal complaint from the injured party, did not know the identity of the other person involved, and had no direct evidence of the assault. While Antonetta's account was consistent, it did not match the known facts. Doctors at the first hospital where Ashley was treated had alerted local authorities because of the seriousness of her condition. However, when police arrived at the apartment complex, the medical report was not connected to the attack. Information about Ashley's injuries and her identity came to light later. The police left the apartment without filing an official report, they only documented a verbal statement. They did not conduct a search or collect phones as evidence, which resulted in the loss of important materials. At this point, Antonetta and Janine were unaware that they would soon be named as official suspects. After the initial examination in the emergency room, doctors suspected Ashley had suffered serious internal injuries. Although she was conscious, she was having difficulty breathing and could barely respond to questions. A CT scan showed multiple severe injuries, broken ribs punctured her lungs, there was internal bleeding around her liver and abdomen, and she had a significant brain injury with swelling. Since the hospital lacked the necessary resources for urgent neurosurgery and abdominal procedures, doctors decided to transfer her immediately to a specialized trauma center. Ashley was put on a ventilator and sedated into a medically induced coma. She was airlifted to a hospital in another part of the state, where a team of trauma surgeons and critical care doctors was ready to assist. Upon her arrival, Ashley was taken straight to the operating room. The surgeons worked to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize her vital signs, but the injuries were too severe. Her liver was partially torn, and there was significant bleeding in her abdominal cavity. During the surgery, it became evident that her injuries were not survivable. About an hour after her transfer, Ashley suffered cardiac arrest. Medical teams performed CPR for 30 minutes but could not revive her. She was pronounced dead early that morning, just a few hours after the incident. While this was happening, hospital staff submitted a report to the local police department stating that a patient showed signs of having been attacked. As Ashley was being moved, this information was relayed to the on-call officer. However, it had not yet been linked to an earlier visit by officers to the complex. Ashley's death changed the legal context of the case. The police department received the hospital's report, which indicated that the situation had turned fatal. Officers quickly connected this update to the previous complaint about a physical altercation and realized that both incidents occurred at the same address. The deceased's last name was verified through medical records and matched with entries associated with the apartment complex. The police leadership decided to send officers back to Antonetta's apartment. By this time, they no longer considered it a simple domestic dispute. The situation was being seen as a potential felony that could result in death. This initiated a formal criminal investigation. Authorities also requested Ashley's complete medical records to assess the severity and nature of her injuries. The initial medical report revealed that her injuries could not have occurred from a minor fight or mutual confrontation. The trauma to her head, chest, and internal organs indicated she had suffered a severe beating. There were multiple blows aimed at vital areas. Additionally, there were no signs of defensive wounds or any indication that she fought back, suggesting that the victim likely did not defend herself during the attack. Following the medical findings, the forensic report, and surveillance footage from the apartment complex, a criminal case was officially opened. After confirming Ashley's death, investigators returned to the complex, arrested Antonetta and Janine. They were taken to the precinct and interviewed separately starting immediately. Antonetta seemed calm but distant during her questioning. She avoided making eye contact, spoke in a low voice, and gave unclear answers. She provided short responses and repeated the same story she had told earlier, that Ashley had come to their home uninvited, started an argument, and threw the first punch. She did not mention any text messages, a pre-arranged meeting, or the use of Daniel's phone. Antonetta maintained that the incident was unplanned and that she acted solely in self-defense. When detectives highlighted discrepancies between her account and the medical evidence, she did not respond. After answering a few more questions, she requested a lawyer and ended the interview. Janine's interrogation took an unexpectedly relaxed turn. She entered the room confidently and spoke freely, showing no signs of nervousness. At times, she even laughed and made sarcastic remarks, behaving more like she was chatting with friends than talking to law enforcement. The detectives mirrored her casual tone and avoided any confrontational approach, which proved effective. Janine began to share details openly about the events, including some information that hadn't been revealed before. She openly explained how Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else, how she had passed that information to Antonetta, and how they devised a plan to message Ashley using Daniel's phone. She also detailed who initially suggested recording the encounter and how they concealed themselves until Ashley arrived. Janine's account of the confrontation was particularly striking. She openly admitted to being physically aggressive, stating that she joined in because she was invited to participate. She even described the incident as amusing. The detectives documented her statements but did not interrupt her. They maintained neutral expressions, allowing her to express herself freely. During the questioning, Janine confirmed that she had recorded the incident on her phone and still had the footage saved. She revealed almost everything Antonetta had tried to hide. Her statements were officially noted. Janine's emotional distance and complete lack of remorse strengthened the evidence that the attack was not only intentional but also planned in advance. After the interviews, investigators obtained search warrants and seized phones from everyone involved, including Janine's. Her phone contained a full video recording of the assault. The footage showed that Ashley did not fight back, and the attacks were carried out methodically with clear intent. The audio also captured mocking remarks, threats, and statements indicating that the attack was premeditated. Daniel's phone showed a message thread where Antonetta pretended to be him to set up the meeting. This was clear proof of the trick used to put Ashley in danger. As a result, Antonetta and Janine were charged with serious crimes, including felony assault and robbery. Their arrests were part of a larger criminal investigation. The charges were explained to them, highlighting the serious legal consequences they faced. Both were arrested without any resistance, but officers closely monitored the situation. Daniel later learned about the events that unfolded. When the arrests took place, he was at work. Officers came to his workplace to inform him of Ashley's death and the charges against Antonetta and Janine. He was heartbroken, having no knowledge of the revenge plan, the impersonation using his phone, or the attack itself. He stated that he could never have predicted that things would turn into such a tragedy. Daniel was asked to provide a formal statement. He confirmed that Ashley had never been a threat to anyone and that their relationship was not a secret. He also mentioned that he had never given his phone to anyone and was unaware of any messages sent from it. His account aligned with the evidence gathered, leading investigators to conclude that he was not involved in the crime. He expressed his willingness to cooperate fully and may be called to testify in court, as the fatal setup was carried out using his digital identity without his knowledge. Both suspects were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison at Arundel State Prison in Georgia. Janine, who was only 17 at the time, was tried as an adult because of the seriousness of the crime. If she doesn't face any disciplinary issues while in prison, she will be released when she is about 37 years old. The impact of the crime was severe. Ashley's son lost his mother. Custody of the child was awarded to his father, who had been involved in his son's life even after he and Ashley ended their relationship. Now, he has taken on full responsibility, working to create a stable and safe environment for his son amidst the profound loss. Daniel and Antonetta's two sons also experienced the loss of their mother. Since Daniel was not implicated in the crime, he retained custody of the children and continued to raise them on his own. Despite the trauma of losing Ashley and the emotional burden of knowing their mother would be in prison for decades, Daniel remained dedicated to his role as a father. Both families were deeply affected. One child lost his mother, while Daniel's two sons were also left without their mother. What began as a situation fueled by jealousy and betrayal ended in tragedy, incarceration, and lasting pain for those who were innocent in this situation. The young lives impacted will always feel the effects of a crime they did not commit and will never fully escape from it. The story of a young Italian college student named Giulia Sacchetti profoundly affected the entire country in the fall of 2023 due to its tragic and senseless nature. Giulia was known for her kindness and trust in others. She showed compassion to a young man who had strong feelings for her, fearing that if she rejected him, he might harm himself. Unfortunately, rather than hurting himself, he directed his pain toward others with devastating results. The full scope of the tragedy was later revealed through Giulia's personal journals, which documented her growing discomfort and emotional struggle. In the aftermath, the individual responsible for the tragedy tried to avoid responsibility by claiming that his actions were driven by overwhelming emotions and temporary confusion. However, the investigation consistently uncovered evidence suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Giulia Sacchetti was born on May 5, 2001, in Padua, Italy. She was the middle child in her family, with an older sister named Elena and a younger brother named Davide. Despite their different personalities, Elena being energetic and rebellious, while Giulia was quiet and obedient, the sisters were very close from an early age. Their family was middle class. Gino, Giulia's father, was an engineer at a local company. Her mother, Monica, worked in city administration. They lived in a spacious house and had several vehicles. Both parents were dedicated to their children. They working hard to provide everything they needed to become kind, responsible individuals. From a young age, Giulia was known for her kindness, empathy. She naturally connected with people, always striving to be helpful and considerate. At times, she was excessively gentle, often avoiding conflict even if it meant sacrificing her own interests. Giulia had a wide circle of friends, effortlessly fit in with any group. In school, she consistently achieved top grades, had a strong interest in literature and foreign languages. However, her true passion lay in art classes, where her teachers recognized her talent and encouraged her to pursue it further. As a teenager, Giulia attended an art academy while still in high school, seriously contemplating a career in the arts. However, as graduation neared, her parents urged her to opt for a more practical, stable career. Taking her father's advice, she enrolled at the University of Padua, one of Italy's leading public universities, chose to study biomedical engineering. Always one to avoid conflict, she agreed without protest and committed herself to her studies, even though she lacked genuine interest in the field. She did not envision a long-term career in biomedical engineering. While at university, Giulia met a classmate named Filippo Toretta, who was also in Padua. Filippo came from a humble background and was the only child of his parents, who cared for him deeply. Giulia and Filippo were in the same department. A mutual attraction quickly grew between them. Their relationship started with long conversations, emotional support, and facing challenges together. When Filippo began to struggle with his studies, Giulia helped him catch up and pass his exams. Soon after, he asked her out on their first date. They officially started dating in January 2022, which was Giulia's first serious relationship. Coming from a protected upbringing, she quickly became very infatuated with him. For the first 6 months, they were nearly inseparable, enjoying each other's company and appearing genuinely happy, which led their family and friends to believe in the strength of their bond. Just 2 months into their relationship, Filippo invited Giulia to dinner at his home, where he referred to her as his future wife while introducing her to his parents. A few weeks later, Giulia reciprocated by bringing Filippo to meet her family. Their friends were convinced that Giulia and Filippo would get engaged by the time they graduated. Life took a devastating turn for Giulia's family when her mother, Monica, was diagnosed with a late-stage illness, and the outlook was grim. Monica's health deteriorated quickly, and despite numerous consultations, doctors indicated there was little hope. The next 6 months felt like a waking nightmare for the Sacchetti family. During this challenging period, Filippo tried his best to provide support. He stayed close to Giulia and also spent time with Monica. Giulia truly valued his presence. She was thankful for his kindness and unwavering support. Nevertheless, even though Monica agreed to participate in experimental treatments, she sadly passed away in October 2022 at just 51 years old. Her death created a huge void in the family. For her husband, Gino, The grief was nearly unbearable. He felt emotionally overwhelmed. It was only through the love and support of his children that he found the strength to carry on. Although Filippo continued to be supportive, changes began occurring in Giulia's feelings toward him. Even though they were still together, she started to feel distant and uncertain about their future. She began to consider ending the relationship but was unsure how to address it without causing conflict or upsetting him. She confided in only her two closest friends, people she had known for years and trusted. They were shocked. On the surface, Giulia and Filippo appeared to be the perfect couple, with a happy, harmonious relationship. However, beneath that facade, things were unraveling. Giulia didn't provide specific details but communicated that the relationship had reached a breaking point and ending it seemed inevitable. She didn't want to hurt Filippo, but she could no longer continue living a lie. The true reason behind her decision would only be revealed much later, following her passing. At that time, Giulia was focused on preparing for her final thesis presentation. However, she realized that she didn't want to pursue a career in biomedical engineering. It simply didn't resonate with her. Without mentioning it to many people, she quietly applied to a prestigious international art school that specializes in comic illustration. When she finally confided in her father, she emphasized that she would complete her university degree as she had promised. She intended to graduate and obtain her qualifications as her parents expected. But after that, she wanted to pursue a second degree in something she was passionate about, becoming an illustrator. Gino listened intently and supported her decision. After the loss of his wife, he had a new outlook on life, recognized its brevity and fragility. He encouraged his daughter to follow her own path, make her own choices, and dedicate herself to what truly made her happy. Giulia's conversation with Filippo turned out to be much harder than she had expected. It took place in August 2023, after they had been together for over a year and a half. Giulia found it difficult to express herself, but Filippo seemed to handle the news maturely. He suggested they remain friends and stay in touch, recognizing the connection they had. Since they attended the same university and studied in the same department, they saw each other frequently. However, less than a week after their breakup, Filippo attempted to rekindle their relationship. He invited Giulia to one of their favorite restaurants, a place that once held special memories for them. He asked her to give their relationship another chance, reminding her of their good times together. Giulia, however, remained resolute. She did not want to repeat old mistakes. The evening ended quietly, but an unspoken tension lingered, only becoming stronger with time. Filippo's behavior took a troubling turn. He began contacting Giulia every day, initially expressing his love and pleading for them to get back together. However, this quickly shifted to manipulation and threats. He warned that he might harm himself if they didn't reconcile. Knowing Giulia's compassionate nature, he exploited her empathy, pushing her emotional buttons. Concerned for his well-being due to his unstable nature, Giulia reluctantly agreed to stay in touch. They briefly resumed seeing each other, driven more by worry than love. Giulia hoped this was only temporary and that their connection would eventually fade. However, Filippo's behavior became increasingly alarming. He flooded her with messages, some of which were distressing. In one, he ominously stated that they would either be together forever or their lives would both end. Although this was a clear threat, Giulia chose not to report it and only confided in her closest friend. This intense situation persisted for nearly 2 months. In late October 2023, Giulia realized she could no longer live in fear. She was set to present her thesis in medical engineering on November 16th, and her classes at the International School of Comics were starting in December. Her schedule was now fully packed, leaving no time for emotional drama or unhealthy attachments. Although still anxious about how Filippo would react, she decided to invite him to a quiet cafe they used to visit. She carefully chose her words to avoid any conflict, explaining that they could remain friends but nothing more. Despite her attempt to be respectful, Filippo was deeply disturbed by her decision. He took the news hard, began to call and message her frequently, but Giulia, busy with her thesis, limited him responses to brief notes. It was around this time that Filippo started secretly following her. He soon noticed she was spending time with someone new guy. Their friendship appeared warm and affectionate, suggesting they might become a couple. Filippo struggled to accept this, and a darker plan began to take shape in his mind. On Saturday, November 11, 2023, Giulia dedicated most of her day to her graduation project. At around 5 p.m., she sent the final version to her academic advisor. Earlier that day, about an hour before, her ex-boyfriend Filippo called her, asking if she would join him to shop for shoes for their upcoming graduation ceremony. It was unusual for him to reach out, as he hadn't contacted her at all for about a week. No texts, calls, or visits. Giulia thought that he had finally accepted their breakup and moved on. Wanting to remain on good terms, she agreed to help him with the shopping. They planned for him to pick her up at 6 p.m. Giulia informed her father that she would be home before midnight and hugged him tightly as she left, unaware that it would be the last time he would see her alive. Filippo arrived at the Sacchetin house right on time. Giulia got into the passenger seat, and they drove to the shopping center in Margra. Witnesses later reported seeing them calmly browsing the stores together. They bought a pair of shoes. Chiaretta and Giulia also had dinner together at a McDonald's inside the mall at around 9:02 p.m., with Giulia paying for both meals with her credit card. They then left the building at around 10:30 p.m. At 10:43 p.m., Giulia sent her final message via WhatsApp to her sister Elena, who was in Vienna at the time for college. However, at 10:45 p.m., her messages suddenly stopped, and she never replied again. Shortly after, her phone was turned off. When Giulia didn't come home by midnight, her family started to worry. At first, they tried to remain calm, thinking she might have just lost track of time. However, by 1 a.m., they began to sense that something was very wrong. Giulia never stayed out overnight without letting someone know. Her phone was off, and they couldn't reach Filippo. Her father and older sister went to file a missing person report while her younger brother stayed home in case Giulia returned. They still held on to a small hope that her phone had died or that she had been delayed, but they believed she would have found a way to let them know she was okay. Police were doubtful about the situation. They pointed out that as an adult, Giulia had the right to choose not to return home or inform anyone of her location. Only a few hours had passed since she was last seen, and according to standard procedure, search efforts for missing adults usually do not start until 24 hours after they go missing. What no one knew at that moment was that about 4 hours before her family reported her missing, an alarming incident had already occurred. This detail was initially overlooked in relation to Giulia's disappearance, but it would soon become evident that it was significant. At around 11:15 p.m. on the night Giulia disappeared, local police received a call from a man. While on his balcony smoking a cigarette, he witnessed something alarming. His apartment overlooked a small parking lot across the street, where he heard someone screaming for help. When he looked more closely, he saw a young woman, clearly terrified, escape from a parked car. Moments later, a man exited the same car, chased her down, and forced her back inside while appearing to hit her. He then pushed her into the back seat and quickly drove off, speeding into the night. The witness tried to remember the license plate number, but couldn't see it clearly in the dark and from a distance. He did remember that the car was a black compact vehicle, possibly a Fiat Punto. He quickly called the local authorities to report what he had witnessed, but since he didn't have many identifying details, they had little to work with. Initially, the authorities dismissed his call because they didn't see it as an immediate threat and chose not to respond. However, the man couldn't shake the feeling that what he had seen was more serious than they realized. Believing he had witnessed a crime, he decided to go to the police station in person. At the station, he met a man named Gino, who was there to report his daughter, Giulia, missing. To their surprise, they discovered they lived only a few houses apart. The man's building was near the end of the street, right across from a small parking lot where the unsettling scene had occurred. The black compact car he described looked a lot like the one driven by Filippo. That same evening, Filippo had picked up his former girlfriend in his black Fiat Punto before they went to the shopping center. Investigators reached out to Filippo's parents, who were understandably anxious. They had been calling friends in hopes of hearing from their son, but unfortunately, no one could provide any helpful information to the police. Officers were quickly sent to the parking lot, which was now thought to be the location of a violent incident. To their disappointment, there were no security cameras in the area. However, security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Faso shows Filippo brutally beating Giulia. When she tried to escape, Filippo hit her again from behind, then stuffed her bleeding body into the trunk of his black Fiat Punto. When arriving at the scene of the attack, what they uncovered was alarming. On the ground was a large knife, its blade broken near the handle. Nearby were several dark reddish stains. Although the blood wasn't excessive, it indicated that someone had been injured. Forensic experts confirmed that the knife bore Filippo's fingerprints, the blood matched Giulia's DNA. The broken blade and a deep gouge in the pavement. Investigators feared the worst but still hoped that Giulia might be alive and urgently in need of help. Both students' phones had been turned off shortly after the incident. Data indicated that their last known location was that parking lot where the suspected assault and abduction occurred. Law enforcement opened a criminal case against Filippo, charging him with assault and unlawful detention based on the evidence collected. His parents were shocked and firmly believed that their son would never hurt Giulia, claiming he loved her deeply. Detectives started tracking Filippo's movements by examining footage from roadside surveillance cameras. Later that night, a black Fiat Punto was spotted heading towards a lake in the Porton province. The next day, the vehicle was seen in multiple areas. On November 12, a young man who matched Filippo's description bought something at a gas station near the Austrian border. He used a €20 bill that had what looked like dried blood on it. The cashier didn't pay much attention to this detail at the time, but later surveillance footage confirmed that the buyer was indeed Filippo. A disturbing piece of evidence surfaced shortly after. Security video footage from a factory in the nearby town of Faso shows Filippo brutally beating Giulia. After the assault, he stood over her lifeless body for several minutes before putting her in the trunk of a car. Investigators found pools of blood and clear signs of a struggle at the scene, leaving no doubt that Giulia had likely been killed. However, her remains were still missing, and the suspect's whereabouts were unknown. Filippo was officially declared wanted throughout Europe. Giulia's body was discovered near Lake Barsis in Piancavallo on November 18, 2023 by the Special Dogs Unit of the Civil Protection. The body was found inside a large nylon bag in a cave at 50 meters altitude, within a wooded area that is generally closed during the autumn-winter period for security reasons. The Italian Forensic Services performed an autopsy on December 1, 2023, and reported that Giulia's body had over 20 stab wounds. She had blunt force trauma to her head, and there were clear signs of her wrists being restrained. Additionally, adhesive residue on her face indicated that her mouth had been taped shut. The circumstances of this case suggested a personal motive and an unusual amount of anger. Filippo was found on November 19 in an emergency lane of a motorway near Leipzig, after his car had run out of petrol. Authorities arrested him and sent him back to Italy, where the case had caused a national uproar. During his initial questioning, Filippo confessed in detail about the events, but he stated that he was emotionally disoriented at the time and couldn't recall some parts of what happened. He recounted that they had spent a pleasant day shopping at the mall. On their way back, they stopped in a parking lot near Giulia's house. Filippo gave her a stuffed animal as a gift and asked if they could start their relationship over. Giulia reportedly raised her voice, rejected the gift, and got out of the car, which he claimed triggered a sudden outburst of anger. He grabbed a knife and chased after Giulia, injuring her shoulder in the process. She fell to the ground, and when he tried to strike her again, he missed, causing his knife to break when it hit the pavement. Filippo claimed he forced her back into the car, tied her wrists with rope, and covered her mouth with tape before driving around without a specific destination. Eventually, they ended up in an industrial area. According to him, Giulia managed to open the door and escape. He then took out a second knife and pursued her, continuing to attack until she stopped moving. When asked how many times he hit her, Filippo estimated maybe 5 or 7. However, the forensic team found over 20 wounds, and his story of an unplanned outburst was contradicted by the fact that he had arrived at the meeting with 2 knives, rope, tape, and plastic bags, indicating he was prepared. Filippo claimed he planned to take his own life afterward in order to be with Giulia. He even revealed shallow cuts on his wrists, although he confessed he didn't go through with it. He found it easier to end another's life than to end his own. Despite strong evidence implicating him, his family's legal team maintained that he was mentally confused and had memory loss. Their entire defense strategy focused on this idea, aiming for a lighter sentence or a transfer to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. Giulia's father, in his grief, took a remarkable action. He gave investigators pages from her personal diary and later made some of them public. His goal was to reveal the truth and draw attention to what his daughter had experienced. The diary entries clearly explained why Giulia had decided to end her relationship with Filippo and what was happening out of public view. Although she had loved him, Filippo had become controlling, emotionally manipulative. He monitored her whereabouts, kept track of her phone and social media, forbade her from seeing friends, and expected her to obey his demands at all times. A significant conflict occurred just before the tragedy involving Filippo's insistence on attending a small family birthday party for Giulia's sister, Elena. This event took place shortly after their mother had passed away, and Giulia's family was not in the mood to celebrate. Despite this, Filippo was angry, feeling that he was part of the family and had the right to attend all family gatherings. This disagreement made Giulia reconsider their relationship, and she recognized that she needed to end things for good. However, Filippo began to use emotional manipulation, threatening to harm himself if she left him. Giulia, being compassionate and empathetic, felt guilty about this. Unfortunately, her kindness would eventually lead to devastating consequences. On September 23, 2024, the summary trial of Filippo Turetta began at the Venice court. He is charged with intentional homicide, aggravated by malice, cruelty, brutality, stalking, and improper disposal of a corpse. By the start of the trial, new evidence indicated that the crime had been premeditated. Investigators discovered that Filippo had begun planning the attack about a week prior, conducting extensive online research for isolated locations in the suburbs that he could use to carry out the act and conceal the aftermath. His browsing history confirmed this. During a search of his car, officers found a printed map of the area. Initially, its relevance was unclear, but it later became evident that Filippo had chosen to use a physical map instead of GPS to avoid leaving a digital footprint. He meticulously planned every detail, but he seemed uncertain about what to do afterward. There were weak indications that he might have considered self-harm, but this was not convincing. By the time of his trial, it was clear that Filippo had acted with intent. He abandoned the emotional disorientation defense and made no claims of psychological instability, admitting that his actions were intentional. As expected, Turetta was questioned at the hearing on October 25, where he presented a 40-page memorial in which he detailed his actions. This prompted the court to cancel the hearing scheduled for October 28, as sufficient questioning had already taken place. At the hearing on November 25, 2024, the prosecutor requested a life sentence for Filippo Turetta. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on December 3, 2024, concluding the trial at the first instance. Aggravating circumstances of premeditated murder, kidnapping, and concealment of the body were acknowledged, while charges of stalking and cruelty were dismissed. In addition, Filippo must pay €760,000 in compensation to the Sacchetti family. In his final statement to the court, Filippo stated he would not appeal the verdict, acknowledging it as fair and expressing no intention to contest the outcome. In Barrhaven, a suburb southwest of Ottawa, Canada's capital, lived Bhupinder Paul Gill and his wife, Jagtar Gill, along with their 3 children. On January 29, 2014, which was their 17th wedding anniversary, it was around noon when Bhupinder Paul set off to the grocery store with his daughter, Harjinder. They planned to buy a cake to celebrate their anniversary and flowers for Jagtar. Jagtar was resting at home because she had just been released from the hospital the day before after undergoing hernia surgery. On that day, Jagtar's other two children were at school, while their eldest daughter, Harjinder, had taken a day off from high school to care for her mother. Bhupinder Paul and his daughter arrived home around 1 p.m. While Bhupinder Paul began to unload groceries from the car, Harjinder headed toward the front door. She noticed that it was unlocked, even though they had securely locked it before leaving for the store. Harjinder entered the house and called out. When she received no response, she felt anxious as she walked toward the living room. To her shock, she found her mother lying on the floor. As she approached, she saw blood on her mother's body. Filled with fear, Harjinder screamed, causing Bhupinder Paul to rush inside. Bhupinder Paul was bewildered when he saw his wife lying on the floor. Harjinder ran upstairs to call an ambulance, only to discover that all the phone wires had been cut. Regaining his composure, Bhupinder Paul used his cell phone to call 911. He was crying profusely. The operator, recognizing his distress, told him to remain calm, lay his wife flat, and try to perform CPR. But as soon as he heard this, Bhupinder Paul became silent. Understanding how serious the situation was, the 911 operator promptly sent an ambulance and police to their home. Shortly after, several police cars and an ambulance arrived at Bhupinder Paul's house. Paramedics quickly assessed the situation, confirmed that Jagtar Gill had already passed away, leaving them unable to help. The police, already on the scene, cordoned off the house. Meanwhile, a woman from the neighborhood approached and began looking through the window at the scene. A police officer asked her if she was related to the Gill family. The woman explained that she lived next door and was friends with Jagtar. She had come over after noticing the police and ambulance, worried about what had happened. The officers did not share much information with her but did tell her that Jagtar Gill had died. Upon hearing this, the neighbor left in tears. The forensic team investigating the case confirmed that Jagtar had been attacked with a heavy object and stabbed multiple times across her body. However, no heavy object or knife was discovered near her body. Following this, police detectives advised Gill family to stay elsewhere for a few weeks so that the forensic team could properly secure the crime scene and collect evidence. Later, while searching the house, police officers found a pair of rubber cleaning gloves. Oddly, one of the gloves was missing a finger. The officers also recovered blood-stained knives hidden beneath some dirty dishes in the kitchen sink. Blood spatters were discovered on the living room carpet, the sofa, the stairs leading to the second floor, the upstairs bathroom floor, and even inside the wash basin. Additionally, the police found a 5-kilogram weightlifting rod in the basement, placed on top of a box of Christmas decorations. This rod also had blood stains, prompting the investigator to consider it as crucial evidence. The police did not consider it a robbery because Barhaven is known to be a safe neighborhood. The doors and locks of the house were intact, and nothing was missing. Jagtar's body still had all her valuable jewelry on. Additionally, the area around Jagtar's house had several new homes being built, which meant that builders and construction companies had set up CCTV cameras to protect their equipment from theft. After examining the CCTV footage, police found no signs of suspicious behavior or concerning individuals. They then spoke with local residents, who provided insights about Jagtar's background. Jagtar moved to Canada in 1994 at 23 years old with her parents and siblings, but the family returned to India in 1997. Later that same year, Jagtar married Bhupinder Paul Gill, who was 20 years old. After their wedding, they came back to Canada and settled in Ottawa. Initially, Jagtar worked at an electronics company, while Bhupinder Paul drove a taxi. To supplement their income, they also delivered pizzas at night and newspapers early in the morning. 2 years after their marriage, they welcomed their first daughter, Harjinder, followed by another daughter and a son. At the time of Jagtar's death, Harjinder was 15, their second daughter, Balwinder, was 10, and their youngest son, Satnam, was 8. Jagtar continued her work at an electronics company, while Bhupinder Paul secured a permanent job as a bus driver with OC Transpo. They worked hard to save money for a new house and eventually bought a home with a double garage in the Barhaven suburb of Ottawa. When their new house was ready, the entire Gill family moved in, including Bhupinder Pal's parents. Jagtar was happy in her new home, but no one could predict the threat that would lead to her tragic murder. On February 20, 2014, many members of the local Sikh community came together at the Gurdwara Sahib in Ottawa to pray for Jagtar's soul. Jagtar Gill had suffered such severe injuries that her family decided to keep the casket closed, allowing only a few individuals to see her face one last time. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Detectives considered the possibility that the killer might be a family member who would try to conceal evidence again. To investigate this theory, the detectives placed a similar weightlifting rod, smeared with fake blood, inside a box of Christmas decorations in the basement and set up a hidden camera nearby. A few days later, the camera captured Bhupinder Pal, just 10 days after Jagtar's death, opening the Christmas box and attempting to conceal the weightlifting rod in his jacket, but it was too large to fit. The next day, Bhupinder Pal returned to the basement and successfully hid a weightlifting bar in his pants. Unbeknownst to him, police officers were watching everything through surveillance cameras. After leaving his house with the bar concealed, officers followed him as he traveled about a kilometer to a nearby wooded area, where he discarded the weightlifting bar in the bushes. Once he was gone, the officers retrieved it. They doubted Bhupinder Pal could be the killer. To verify his alibi, they checked CCTV footage from the supermarket to confirm his presence there at the time of Jagtar's death. The footage corroborated his statement, but it left one lingering question: why did Bhupinder Pal throw the metal bar into the bushes? To investigate the situation, the officers created a fake news story claiming they had discovered a blood-stained weightlifting rod linked to Jagtar's murder in a wooded area. After this story was published, the officers waited to see how Bhupinder Pal would react. Upon reading the news, Bhupinder Pal went directly to the police station and confessed that he had thrown the weightlifting rod into the bushes. When asked why, Bhupinder Pal explained that he found the rod near Jagtar's body. At that time, he was scared that the attacker might still be in the house, so he picked up the rod and searched the entire house, including the basement, but found no one. Later, he discarded the rod in a corner of the basement. However, he forgot to tell the police that the rod was initially next to Jagtar's body. A week later, seeing the rod still in the basement made him anxious, so he decided to throw it into the bushes near their home. After the interrogation, a team of police officers searched the area around Jagtar's house and spoke with some neighbors. They spoke to a man named Scott Fewer, who was a close friend of Bhupinder Pal. Scott said he visited Bhupinder Pal the day after Jagtar's death to offer his condolences. However, he told the police that Bhupinder Pal did not appear to be sad about his wife's passing. Scott noted that the relationship between Bhupinder Pal and Jagtar Gill was unusual, as they frequently seemed to be upset with one another. He also mentioned that Bhupinder Pal had a close friendship with a 35-year-old woman named Gurpreet Ronald, who lived nearby. According to Scott, Bhupinder Pal and Gurpreet interacted very comfortably, suggesting they had known each other for a long time. After Gurpreet's name was mentioned in the case, the police invited her to the station for questioning. Upon her arrival, an officer recognized her as the woman who had been seen trying to look through the window of Jagtar's house around the time of the murder. Gurpreet had moved to Canada with her parents at a young age and later married a white Canadian man named Jason. Although they had been married for 13 years, their relationship had recently been strained by frequent arguments, largely due to suspicions of infidelity on both sides. A female detective then began questioning Gurpreet in another room, asking how she knew Jagtar. Gurpreet responded that they were not only neighbors but also very good friends. She used to drive buses for the same company as Bhupinder Pal. During further questioning, Gurpreet mentioned that she was quite close to Jagtar Gill. They would often go shopping together and spend their free time talking. The detective's next question focused on Gurpreet's activities on the day of the murder, January 29th. Gurpreet said she woke up early, had breakfast, and started cleaning her house. Later, she called her friend Rosa to plan a meeting for the afternoon. Rosa, an interior designer, needed help with a project for a friend's house. Before meeting Rosa at around 12:30 p.m., Gurpreet went shopping. The investigator asked which shopping center she visited and what she bought. Gurpreet initially said she went to a store but found nothing worth purchasing, so she returned home empty-handed. However, she later changed her story, saying she encountered Bhupenderpal and his daughter Harjinder at the store, where they were buying cabbage. Gurpreet also bought a cabbage, got home around 1:30 p.m. Upon returning, she noticed an ambulance outside Bhupenderpal's house and tried to look through the window to see what was happening. After this, the female detective asked Gurpreet about the relationship between Bhupenderpal and Jagtar Gill. Gurpreet described Jagtar Gill as a very traditional woman who adheres to Indian and Punjabi customs. She volunteered additional information about her character without being prompted. She also mentioned that she frequently communicated with Bhupenderpal through calls, messages because they worked at the same job and usually had overlapping shifts. After this, the female interrogator asked Gurpreet about the interior designer, Rosa, who was supposed to visit her. Gurpreet explained that when she returned home from shopping, she found her friend Rosa waiting at her front door. The interrogator observed that Gurpreet was providing overly detailed answers, as if she felt the need to justify herself. In the interview, the interrogator noticed that Gurpreet had a bandage on one of her fingers. When asked about it, Gurpreet said she had cut her finger while cutting potatoes when the knife slipped. However, the finger she injured was the same one that had a cut on the glove found at the crime scene. The police interrogation concluded for now, but they then spoke to Gurpreet's friend Rosa. She reported that she and Gurpreet actually met at about 3:30 p.m. on January 29th, not at 1:30 p.m. as Gurpreet had previously said. Rosa mentioned that she had asked Gurpreet why an ambulance and police were present on their street that day. Gurpreet told her that Jagtar Gill, their neighbor, had been stabbed and killed. This information surprised the police because at that point, they had not yet allowed Gurpreet into the house or revealed any details about Jagtar Gill's death. Gurpreet was aware of who in the Gill family had been murdered and what weapon was used, which raised the police's suspicions about her and Bhupenderpal. It is not unusual for an attacker to accidentally injure themselves during a stabbing. As a result, the police began wiretapping the phones of Gurpreet and Bhupenderpal, hoping they would discuss Jagtar's murder, but the wiretaps did not capture any relevant conversations. When the police reviewed the call history from a month prior to the murder, they discovered that the two individuals had communicated about 250 times during that time, averaging 8 to 9 calls a day, even on the day of the murder. However, all the evidence collected so far was circumstantial and did not directly connect either of them to the crime. Among the evidence from the crime scene was DNA found near Jagtar's body. Investigators also noted a cut on Gurpreet Ronald's hand. They needed a DNA sample from Gurpreet because if she was connected to the murder, her DNA should match the samples found at the scene. To collect Gurpreet's DNA for testing, a plainclothes police investigator knocked on Gurpreet's door, claiming to be from the construction industry conducting a survey. She told Gurpreet that by participating, she could enter a draw for prizes, 6 months of free mortgage payments for the winner and a vacation for the runner-up. After hearing this, Gurpreet agreed to take part, filled out a form, and sealed it in an envelope with her saliva. The investigator took the envelope and left. This allowed the police to collect Gurpreet's DNA sample, which they sent for testing. Additionally, the police employed other tactics to gather evidence against Gurpreet. At one point, they left a note on her car that simply read "Killer." They hoped this would prompt her to call Bhupenderpal to discuss the murder. Instead, Gurpreet reported the note to the police and chose not to mention it to Bhupenderpal at all. Days later, the DNA test results revealed that Gurpreet's DNA was present in multiple areas of the house. Specifically, it was found near Jagtar's body, in the kitchen, and in several places in the upstairs bedroom. This strong evidence led the police to arrest Gurpreet on May 7, 2014, charging her with the first-degree murder of Jagtar Gill. Just 6 days after Gurpreet's arrest, on May 13, 2014, Bhupenderpal was also arrested. The police identified both men as co-accused, and they faced trial together. In court, both individuals were present and from the start, they attempted to demonstrate their innocence. However, the investigators presented a case summary to the judge that outlined the motive for Jagtar's murder and the details of how it was executed. The summary indicated that Bhupender Paul had been unhappy in his marriage with Jagtar Gill for some time but felt unable to divorce her due to the negative stigma surrounding divorce in their community. Additionally, Bhupender Paul and Gurpreet had been involved in an affair for 4 years prior to Jagtar's death. Together, they conspired to murder Jagtar in order to continue their relationship. On January 29, Bhupender Paul took his elder daughter, Harjinder, out of the house for a specific reason. Before leaving, he placed a metal weightlifting bar near the stairs so that Gurpreet could easily find it and use it to kill Jagtar Gill when she entered the house. Following their plan, Gurpreet approached Jagtar under the guise of borrow some tools. When the time was right, she attacked Jagtar with the weightlifting bar, but this initial assault did not kill her. Gurpreet then went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Jagtar multiple times. Ultimately, it was the final cut to Jagtar's throat that led to her death. Gurpreet chose not to call Bhupender Paul to inform him about the murder to avoid leaving any record of the conversation. Instead, she went directly to the supermarket and spoke to him face to face. Even more disturbing than the murder itself was that Bhupender Paul sent his daughter into the house first, knowing that her mother's lifeless body was inside. The little girl, who was bringing a bouquet for her mother, was forced to witness a traumatic scene that would likely stay with her forever. In the court proceedings, all the police investigators gave their testimonies one by one, along with Bhupender Paul's neighbor, Scott, an interior designer. Some post-mortem photographs of Jagtar Gill were also presented in court. However, when these images were shown, Jagtar's family members could not bear to look and left the courtroom immediately. The police presented a key witness in court named Suzanne Shields, a life coach who advises people on maintaining happiness. After hearing about the murder in the news, she contacted the police and revealed that 1 year prior, Bhupender Paul and Gurpreet sought her advice on their relationship. Susan mentioned that they were determined to stay together and had expressed strong feelings of hatred towards Jagtar Gill. Her testimony helped the police establish the motive for Jagtar's murder in court. Gurpreet and Bhupender Paul had different lawyers representing them, and although their lawyers told various stories, the police had already collected ample evidence. July 20, 2016, the jury declared Gurpreet Ronald and Bhupender Paul Gill guilty of first-degree murder. They are now serving life sentences and will not be eligible for parole until 25 years later. After this, Jagtar's niece, Ramandeep Chahal, addressed the media outside the court. She read a statement that was prepared by her family. In this statement, they shared their deep feelings for Jagtar's death. Following their 2016 convictions, Bhupender Paul Gill and Gurpreet Ronald appealed their first-degree murder sentences, arguing procedural errors in the original trial. In 2019, the Ontario Court of Appeal ordered a retrial, citing issues with the jury instructions. The retrial, held in 2021, reaffirmed the guilty verdicts for both defendants, upholding their life sentences with no parole eligibility for 25 years. This outcome solidified the court's findings that Bhupender Paul and Gurpreet conspired to murder Jagtar Gill to continue their affair, leaving the Gill family to grapple with their ongoing loss. The murder of Jagtar Gill in Barrhaven, Canada, shattered a family and stunned a community, revealing a chilling betrayal orchestrated by her husband, Bhupender Paul Gill, and his lover, Gurpreet Ronald. Their conspiracy, driven by a clandestine affair, led to Jagtar's brutal death, leaving her 3 children to endure profound loss. The 2016 convictions and 2021 retrial delivered justice, sentencing both to life imprisonment with no parole for 25 years, yet no punishment can heal the wounds inflicted on the Gill family. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that trust, once broken, can unravel lives, underscoring the enduring need for compassion and accountability in the pursuit of justice.